Welcome to special regular meeting, Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. We'll begin with roll call.
Councilmember Brookover.
Here.
Councilmember Garcia. Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Here.
Mayor Bacon.
Present. I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Agenda carries. Next up, all written communications received by council are posted to the online agenda packet. Next up after that, communication from the audience. I'll start with Aaron, Valley Court.
Thanks. I'm Aaron Souza. I live at 621 Sunset. And I read the city's application for the MEDC funding. A couple of things that stuck out of that. One is the amount of money that the city has to find elsewhere to make that work, such that $1 million is not really worth $1 million. Second, the claims in the application about people struggling to access food downtown, when in fact food is not that difficult to find downtown when you think Target is not that far away. As a part of my day job, where I'm Dean of the College of Human Medicine, we work in Flint. Specifically, we have a health geographer working on food deserts. We also work in the same thing in the northern portion of the state. The sort of implication that there's something similar between those communities and what we see in downtown East Lansing is, I would argue, disingenuous. Disingenuous in the application, and then continuing that thread by approving it would be essentially perpetuating that disingenuous sort of concept. And I think you have to think about what that means to the communities that actually do face food deserts and the implications for their children and their life expectancy. Thank you.
Thank you. Barb, 4.1, 5.1.
Yes, thank you. My name is Barb Anderson. I live here in the Glencairn neighborhood. I've been a university instructor for over 15 years in urban planning and landscape architecture. And before that, I was in professional public practice as a landscape architect and urban planner. My two areas are environmental planning and transportation planning, and I'm on the city the City of East Lansing Commission on the Environment. I want to speak briefly on two topics: Valley Court Park, the proposed redesign, and the Crown Castle small cell towers. Valley Court Park, I hear some residents, especially those with kids, want some changes. Shade, mainly, which is ideally solved with shade trees. There needs to be more shade trees there, in my opinion. Stormwater retention is a huge problem, as we know, in East Lansing. Or actually, non-retention, AKA flooding. The addition of more impervious surfaces, such as parking lots and roofs, like the planned shelter farmers market building, would only add to the problem. There are other ways to deal with the issues of more parking and places for people to gather. One thing I can suggest for the transportation aspects, the trend is to drive less and to bike, walk, and use public transit more for our health, for the health of the environment. And so I'd like to see more design focused on those kinds of aspects. And then for the Crown Castle cell towers, I'll just talk a little about aesthetics. I think 4-story tall steel towers is what I understand they are planning. don't fit with the neighborhood and would be quite the visual eyesore. And then I'm also concerned about wildlife, the bat colonies especially, and the effects on human health. And lastly, I'll just say I'm not against change, but it should be change that is thoughtful and well-designed and has exhaustive public input. And democracy, as you all know, is messy, but worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane, Valley Court.
Hello, my name is Diane Wing. I live in the Chesterfield Hills Historic District. I'm chairperson of the Historic District Commission for East Lansing, and I'm speaking in that capacity this evening, at least for a moment or two, about Valley Court Park. From my read on what is in front of council tonight is that the plan looks still the same as it was originally presented to council sometime in 2022. I know that Trevor Bosworth presented changes to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board on January 18th, which all appear to be positive changes, but I don't necessarily see those changes incorporated in what you're being asked to approve this evening. From the HDC standpoint, we saw the changes to the park on our regular meeting of November 10th of 2022. At that time, it was presented to us, and we declined to act upon it because not enough was known about what materials were going to be used, what configuration, really importantly, exactly what was going to be done to the Board of Water and Light substation. So as we explained to Mr. Menzer, who at that point in time was presenting it to us, we would need to see both applications over again for the park itself as well as for the substation before the HDC could deliberate and make a determination whether or not to issue a certificate of appropriateness. So what you have in front of you this evening does not have a certificate of appropriateness for either the pavilion or for the Board of Water and Light substation. That would still have to be obtained before any work could go forward in the park. The other piece of it that we had asked for, as a body, we had asked for an exploration of the Board of Water and Light substation to determine exactly what kind of material was up on the roof especially. We don't know if the roof is savable. It's slate. Usually slate can be repaired. We also don't know about the cupola on top, what that's made of. To my knowledge, that exploratory work on the substation has not been done. The last time the HDC met was March 9th, just this past Thursday. To my knowledge, well, I know it wasn't on the agenda. I wasn't at the meeting of the 9th. It was not presented, to my knowledge, to the HDC on the 9th. So to my knowledge, it still is the same as it has been. I urge the council to say no and to reject the application. Not just because of the HDC, and here I'll stop talking as the HDC chairperson and start talking as a private citizen. I feel that the current state of the city right now, the huge loss of leadership that the city is seeing in terms of its invaluable expertise, staff, and I just found out a couple of minutes ago that Deputy Director Nicole McPherson is leaving. And although I only know Director McPherson as the consummate professional that she is, she has become a friend. She is a friend to me. She is a friend to our neighborhoods. She is a friend to everybody who lives and has to transport themselves through the city. And I don't know what's going on in the city. I don't claim to know what's happening, but there is something endemic that's happening in this city that so many of us love. And I'm getting pissed about it. And Mayor Bacon and Mr. Talaferro, you spoke so oddly about the situation last Tuesday. I didn't understand what you were saying. This is a crisis that the city has. I've got less than a minute. This is a crisis that the city has. All of your focus should be on figuring out what is the problem that is causing all of these professionals. Mr. Menzer is leaving. Mr. Fehrenbach has left. All of these people who hold the city together are leaving. We hear nothing from you. What are you doing to stop this bleeding? You can't continue.
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. You can't continue to do things like talk about Valley Court Park and $1 million grant when we're losing staff. It's my understanding the Planning Commission's going to be bringing form-based code to you. No way. Form-based code is one of the most complicated subjects I've ever heard presented. There's no staff to implement form-based code. You've got 5G cell towers. That's what people really care about right now. How many people are here to talk about 5G cell towers? Please, whatever is happening within the city, address it now. Address it forthrightly before we, as a community, lose more of our valued public servants. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred, 5G.
Good evening. CEL, the organization that has asked you to take 2 actions tonight, did not exist before February 27th. February 27th is when those of us who are concerned about 5G and the facilities, there are already 12 of them out there, and they are all ugly and they all beep. We were concerned about that. We went to talk to representatives of Crown, and Crown's representatives said, we really don't know because we're mere instruments of the company we will be provisioning, and that's Verizon. And Verizon wasn't there. So no one could tell us where they propose to put more of these ugly beeping towers. And no one could tell us what to expect in the future. There's a complete refusal to provide transparency. The memorandum that I distributed to each of you last week was also sent to Crown. And I invited them to please respond to the concerns that were voiced in that memo and that have been voiced to you last week and will be voiced here tonight, and have been voiced here tonight, about what is happening. The strategy seems to be not to tell you where these over 60 towers are going to be and whether they will be co-located, which is to say placed on existing structures so as not to add to eyesores or add eyesores to the neighborhood, and especially residential neighborhoods, as opposed to using existing locations as the act under which these are allowed to be placed on an expedited and with virtually no real review allows. The act says that the preference in Section 1 is on co-location, that is, use existing facilities. No response from Crown to me or to CEL, anyone else. But I do notice that on your agenda tonight, not a 5-minute segment, but an agenda item is Crown. And what are they presenting to you? The beautiful structures that they have available that they can use that are virtually indistinguishable from the ones that they will replace and that will not be eyesores. But what they haven't told you and what they haven't told us is which structures will be placed where, which ones will be co-located, which of these beautiful structures they're capable of putting in to replace existing structures they will be using, and which will be, like the 12 that have already been put in, ugly, beeping, 40-foot steel fingers. And I use the term finger aware of what its significance is in this instance. No response, no transparency. They're going to come and tell you how beautiful they can make things, but they're also probably not telling you, because they didn't in their exhibit, where they're going to put what. All we're asking, number one, is that you take action on the 2 pending applications, which interestingly, we can't date and don't know when they were filed. Your engineer doesn't know that there is an application, but there was a stealth publication. This is how they proceeded so far. They publish them 1 at a time or 2 at a time. Nobody notices because they're buried in the paper. And then they do it after automatic approval occurs, 90 days after the application. Well, that's stealth. What we believe is more appropriate is that the company come forward, show us what they plan to do, and give this body and its remaining staff the opportunity to suggest alternatives when anything other than co-location is proposed. The act allows for a
30
movement
seconds
of the
remaining.
proposed location, thank you, up to 75 feet. It also allows you to use your power or your staff's power to ask for additional time by simply extending the automatic approval date by the time permitted under the statute and your ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark, 5G.
My name is Mark Breedlove. I live in the Glencairn neighborhood. I brought a visual aid tonight that I'm passing out. Can I offer you a couple to share? I took this photograph this morning at Wildwood and Harrison, a 5G tower. And I just want to point out to you that once these towers are up, apparently we have no control over what will be added to the towers. So here's a 5G tower, and I hope everyone in the audience has had a chance to look at them, pass them around. I don't know how to describe this except to say that someone went to a junkyard, grabbed a bunch of debris, and glommed it onto a pole, including, notice at the bottom, a wrapping of electrical tape on the bottom. Now, this was not put up by Crown Castle or by Verizon, as far as I know. But presumably, Verizon would be under the same regulations, or rather I should say, the lack of regulations, as this company is. And so we have no idea. I mean, when Fred said they're ugly, that's when they're sleek and unadorned. But this is what they can look like. And so I just want to say, if everyone's had a chance, I'm wondering if any of the residents today would like to raise their hands and volunteer to have one of these towers put in front of your home in the right-of-way. Anyone? Anyone in City Council want to volunteer for that? I mean, if you do, I'm okay with that, but I need to warn you, your neighbors are going to despise you from that day forward if you got your way. And again, to speak to Fred's point, so it was our address that was listed in the classified ad in the week between Christmas and New Year's. Thank goodness it came to our attention. And supposedly, they're going to maximize the chance for co-localization. Well, on our property in our backyard, there is a big wooden pole, and on Rosewood, at the edge of our property, is another big wooden pole. Looks to me like it's at least 30 feet, might be 40 feet. And yet, the ad they put in the paper isn't, we're going to co-localize with these existing structures. It is, we're going to put up a new 40-foot tower at my address. And as I've told you before, I don't know where they think they're going to put it. And when we came to Crown Castle at that information night to try to see some idea, I got to tell you, no one there seemed to know either. And all they could tell us is generalities about what they would like to do and what they try to do. And I'm sure tonight they're going to tell you, oh, they would never put a bunch of stuff on one of their poles the way these folks did. But I'll remind you that once the pole's up, apparently you don't have any say in it. And neither do the people living there, and neither do the people living around that. So I just want to, once again, it really, I understand that there was supposed to be a representative from Verizon here tonight, and lo and behold, they've backed out at the last minute. And I think I know why. They've got a brand to protect, and it's much easier for them to have Crown Castle come and take the criticism while they protect their brand. So I hope that indeed, as Fred says, that City Council will use the powers it does have to try to slow this process down some. And I hope that Crown Castle and Verizon will work with those of us in Cell to find a way to get their 5G network up without making our neighborhoods eyesores. Thanks very much.
Thank you. David, small cell.
Hi, Dave Lockman. I live in the Glencairn neighborhood. And actually, I think this has been pretty much covered, but echoing what Mark said, I have the same concern because they're operating under the auspices of a utility. So when the Board of Water and Light feels that one of the trees on my property is a danger to the public line, they come and trim the tree. They don't have to ask my permission. So I think Mark is right. Once the towers are up, there's nothing we'll be able to say about it. As to how ugly those towers are, the towers that they're proposing, the dimensions are actually larger. The antennas themselves can be enclosed in a 6 cubic foot space, and the appurtenances related to them, which was really vague, can be in a 25 cubic foot volume, which is just getting massive. That's like 3 by 3 by 3. So I mean, I share the other speakers' concerns. And the other thing I would say, this goes to the characterization of the cell carrier as a utility. And I understand that most of us now have a cell phone, we don't have a home phone, so okay, that's a utility. But the need, if you read Crown Castle's, what they have on their website, their justification was the need is to make wireless service faster, more dependable, and ready for exciting new wireless technologies. So I need water, but I don't really need faster wireless, and I don't really need exciting new technologies, so it concerns me that this is being, I mean, it's the horse is out of the barn. I guess now wireless service is a utility, but these things aren't needs. I don't care if I have exciting new wireless technologies at the expense of a nasty tower that's blinking and beeping. It's not. And once it's there, there's nothing you'll be able to do about it. So that is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill, small cell.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Bill Dietrich. I live in the Glencairn neighborhood. I've been there 28 years. My concern is about the radio frequency radiation. And I would refer people in the room to a website called ehtrust.org. EH-Trust, the Environmental Health Trust. It has numerous studies of a lot of different topics, but it does cover the topic of small cell tower radiation. And they don't offer their opinion, they just print the studies. And just to review a little bit of what's there, I took a look at 3 studies. One was entitled The Impact of Radio Frequency Radiation on DNA Damage and Antioxidants in Peripheral Blood Lymphocytes of Humans Residing in the Vicinity of Mobile Phone Base Stations. This was from Brazil, 2017. They found that between the people living near the cell towers compared to people who weren't, there was a noticeable effect, an important effect in terms of their health. It's very complicated, so I did not add a bunch of stuff on that because very few of us here will even understand it. Second one was from, this one's from Brazil. It's a low-intensity exposure to electromagnetic fields from radio base stations to cancer mortality in Brazil, 2021. And what they found was that the closer people lived to cell towers, the higher the median mortality rate. So they measured that, and so that's something we should take a look at. And then the last one is entitled Mobile Base Station Tower Settings Adjacent to School Buildings. and the impact on student cognitive health. And that came from American Journal of Men's Health, 2018. And what they found in the children that were in those schools is delayed fine and gross motor skills, spatial working memory was compromised, and in older kids, the attention span was compromised for all the students who were exposed to low RF EMF. I think it's important in making a decision like this that studies like this be looked at. We're told by FCC and of course Verizon and Crown and other government people, oh yeah, it's safe. But you know, a lot of things the FDA and CDC tell me are safe actually aren't, because I look up studies, I read studies, I don't get my information from government agencies, I get it from scientific studies. And so I think we need to take a good look at scientific studies that are out there, look at the data. And I would like to see Crown Castle not just say, oh yeah, they're safe, but actually address these studies to show us how they can overcome, what they're going to do to overcome these issues of compromised health, and in children, compromised learning. I don't know if any of these are next to any school buildings or very close. There is one planned for about 150 feet from my house. There's one planned for the corner of it would be Hillcrest and Marshall. There's one plan for there. There was a map on the website that had all the dots of where these were supposed to be. And so it does seem excessive looking at it. But again, let's consider the possible health problems with this, and let's not do it if it's going to affect our health. Thank you.
Thank you. Kristen, Valley Court, Cell.
Hi, I'm Kristen Good, 609 Wallbridge Drive. Related to the consideration of the placemaking grant at Valley Court Park, I really urge you to decide against it. Even if it leaves funding on the table, I would love to see a focus on restoration of what is there. You know, the substation could be lovely. It could be used in a lot of really neat ways if properly restored. My kids miss the rainbow steps. You know, just little things. My family loves that park and the green space, and they've enjoyed it tremendously. You know, football games, all kinds of things. It's a really nice respite, especially among all of the large buildings that are going up. I know I'm not the only one who values it. Many people do. I also haven't really seen a good plan for maintenance of it. I see the city staff work so hard on maintaining the city. I think with more resources, we can do more. We can do a lot more with landscaping. We can just do a lot with beautification, and I just don't think we need another structure to maintain in that location. The farmers market's lovely. It does very well. I've never seen a need for parking. We ride our bikes most of the time, but if we need to drive, we find a spot. So I'm all for progress, but I just don't think that that is the right place for East Lansing at this time. With regard to the cell towers, I really am in total support of the cell organization. It's an amazing group, and I really hope that the council will leverage their expertise and the hard work that they're putting into these recommendations. The towers aren't planned for my neighborhood yet, but they're planned for my community, and that's important for me, and I'm really watching closely the precedent that is set by council on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Alice? This is my last slip. I think there's more people in the audience who want to speak, though, so if you have it, just state your full name after this set of comments, and we'll move forward.
Hi, Alice Drager from East Lansing Info. It is Sunshine Week, which is the week that we celebrate access to open government. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that since my job is to report on government. So Jody Raves Spotted Bear, who is my colleague in local news delivery, writing this week in Buffalo's Fire, which is the newsfeed of the Indigenous Media Freedom Alliance, wrote a wonderful piece called Sunshine Week Should Be Celebrated in Indian Country, but we have no freedom of information laws. And I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs from that by Jody. National Sunshine Week, started by the American Society of News Editors, now the News Leaders Association, is set to kick off March 12th to the 18th, so that's now. It's an homage to the free flow of information in a democratic society. Each state has freedom of information laws similar to federal government. These laws make government accountable to the people. But there's a caveat to the open government record rule. The Native American Journalists Association estimates that fewer than 5 of the 574 indigenous nations in the United States have freedom of information provisions. The lack of timely and accurate information creates news deserts in communities already pummeled by high poverty, decreased life expectancy, and high imprisonment rates. Just a few examples of economic, health, and social ills that might be less severe with a vibrant and independent news ecosystem. Unquote. We are really fortunate. We have really good open government laws in Michigan, although the Open Meetings Act doesn't have much teeth. It's at least a really well-written law, and we also have the Freedom of Information law in Michigan. That said, we generally should not have to use FOIA in the city of East Lansing. We shouldn't have to resort to filing information requests. We should just be able to get information when we ask for it. So how are things going here? Some things are going really well in East Lansing. Presentations now are included in packets of council, for example, which in the past I had to fight over and over again to have happen. It was often the case that the day after a presentation I would have to FOIA it to get it, which was crazy because it had been presented the night before. Now it's regularly presented, so that is wonderful. Marie Wicks is our acting city clerk, and she's doing a spectacular job with FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act requests, as she did when she was city clerk before. OMA is being observed, the Open Meetings Act is being observed very well in terms of meeting notices being clearly presented in the city's portal. It makes it very, very accessible to the people, so that is great. But there is still not as much sunshine as we would like. Just as an example, I mean, people are asking what is going on in the city in terms of all of the resignations. I think if it were the case that everybody were leaving for a separate reason, we would know that. So people are asking for transparency on that, and I think that's a reasonable request. Another example is that the council, when they terminated the contract with the city manager, said it was because you wanted to go in a different direction. That suggests you have a particular direction planned for the next city manager appointment. So tell us, what is that direction that you're going in? The people should know what it is. Another example of not bringing forward information is that the DDA's Evergreen bond refinance has closed, but nobody came to council and told council. In case you're curious what happened, you have a 4.86% rate with a 3-year prohibition on prepayment, which is different than what council was told would be likely to happen on December 6th. And the city is not responding to our questions about the latest resignations. Yesterday I tried to get answers and the communications department is no longer talking to me. We're all human. We all struggle, we make mistakes, but the reason we need a free press and access to information for the people is that we function as a safety net for the people of East Lansing. So it's very important that we follow these things. The last thing I just want to tell you is that you're doing this thing where Crown Castle is coming forward, and we see this with development projects where certain people, mostly corporations, get to sit at the table as long as they want and talk to you as long as they want, whereas the people in the room don't get to do that, even though often they have tremendous amounts of expertise, because people in this city, they really educate themselves. So one of the things I want to remind you in terms of open government and transparency and communication processes is there is nothing in your council operating procedures that prevents you from continuing to engage the people in the audience past the point of public comment. Nothing says you can't call on, for example, Fred Baker to have him step up and talk more, or Mark Breedlove, or whomever it is. You can actually have people engage with you directly if you want to continue talking with them. Often when people
30
hear
seconds
city is
remaining.
having a discussion-only meeting or a discussion meeting, they think that means there's going to be a discussion with council. But that's not what happens. What happens is they speak at public comment and then you have a discussion. And they say to me afterwards, why didn't we get to have a discussion? I thought we were going to have a discussion. I just want to tell you there's nothing in your procedures that prevents you from having that transparent and open discussion with the people who are here. And you know, you could give them the same deference as traditionally our government has given developers and corporations. Thank you.
Thank you. public comment? Seeing none. Online?
We have a couple of callers online. Caller with the number ending in 954, you're welcome to address the council.
Good evening to you. This is Nicole Diver, living in the Pinecrest neighborhood. I'd like to start with appreciation for what Alice just said. I've certainly been thinking about how wonderful it is to hear so many of our neighbors come up and want to say what is on their mind, know that that has every promise that should make a difference. And that alongside the very frustrating realization that there are certain codes and whatnot that makes it very difficult for those voices to have the impact that they deserve to, because of the outside influence that corporations such as Verizon have on decision makers. Well before these things even came up, and are now very much present and are making people very uneasy to be right outside their doors. So I think that's really worth kind of pondering. And I think something that also frustrates me is that it gives a lot of people a bad view of the government. So it's this thought that I think gets sadly conflated because the two have come so much to be as the norm that that's what's listened to, is those interests of what's the developer, what's the corporation, what's the moneymaker want. And it's the thing of corporations are people more than people are almost. And so I think I very much with the acronym CEL, that group, I commend you, and I hope you keep asking for answers and demanding them and just wanting specificity. And it's very revealing that even just asking for a map and saying, what are the plans, is coming to such a roadblock. Insofar as Valley Court, disturbing to hear that some of the positive changes maybe aren't quite in there anymore. I'm on the Parks and Rec Commission. It's like, well, at least it's going in a direction that shows people are a little bit being listened to. Hopefully it'll be even more of a rethinking of, for example, if there's permeable surfaces, but, again, there's the sort of realization like, well, it's maybe easier. Here's the concrete. This is how it's been done. This is sort of the norm. It's very heartening to me to hear people really wanting to resist that. The presentation by the man from the company, I really liked what he was saying about how with green space you can have a higher quality of green space. For example, with native species, with the really thoughtful plantings of trees, bioswales. There's nothing preventing us from having that be definitely what happens, that sort of thoughtful envisioning of what our shared green spaces can be, how they can serve community members that absolutely don't have a voice when we think about the animal species and plants for that matter, and insects. So it's interesting that these two matters have engendered so much interest in the community. I feel, even though the feelings might not be positive, I think it's very positive that people are engaged, and that a lot of what we're looking towards and feeling connected to and concerned about is the immediacy of our surroundings and what that looks like, and how meaningful that is to us, that there's beauty in it, that there's a sense of peace, that there's something we can count on that isn't going to be taken out of our hands. So I just want to thank everyone who's been speaking up so much.
Thank you.
Caller by the name of Cheryl Dudley, you're welcome to address council.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I was just like to say that the other day on my security cameras, I was out and I noticed several workmen in my yard. There's a tall telephone pole in the backyard between my yard. I'm on 822 Tarleton. And there were workmen back there. There were two carloads of them out in hard hats measuring and looking. And I'm going, is that the Board of Water and Light? Is that the city of East Lansing? I called both of those places and they said, no, we don't have any workers out. And I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. And then it dawned on me, those are the people scouting around, looking to find out where they're going to put the 5G towers and all. And that really, really, really concerned me because we worked so hard to stay healthy, exercise, eating right, supplements. And then we're going to put a cancer-causing 5G cell tower 50 feet away from my door. After being a resident in East Lansing for 51 years, that would really cause me to move quick. I just pray that that's not what's going to happen, but I'm so afraid that that is what's going to happen. And it feels like we don't have any say-so in whether this tower is put right, right in our yard. And I heard the other citizens comment, and, I'm so glad they came forth and spoke out and brought the facts forward. It just really frightens me. Those are very dangerous towers to have right where your grandchildren, your children, and everybody, comes to visit and where you live.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Caller by the name of Cheryl Dudley, you're welcome to address council if this is a separate caller.
I think that's the same one.
Okay, then that is all that's in the queue.
Next up, communication from council. Councilperson Brookover.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to depart from my usual tack, which is I don't feel like prolonging meetings, but I think the correct term nowadays is shout out. But I want to congratulate the East Lansing boys basketball team and its coaches for progressing to the regional final tomorrow night against Battle Creek Central High School. And the reason I'm saying that is because 55 years ago this week, we had a very highly rated East Lansing High School basketball team, which got beat by Battle Creek Central in the regional finals. And so I hope these guys will win tomorrow night. Thank you.
Councilperson Watson.
No, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
I don't have anything tonight, thank you.
Yeah, first I want to start off with the 100th anniversary of the library. Congratulations on an amazing event. Thanks to our state representative. I got to see you were there out in support. Penelope, thank you so much for always supporting our community and being engaged with everything that's going on here, and even just the phone calls and check-ins and everything that you do for our community. I always want to make sure that I share how engaged you are with us, so thank you. And thanks to Kristen, Bryce, their entire team, just a wonderful group of people with a really tough task in the community, and really the linchpin that kind of holds our community together. So I'm just thankful for everything that they do. Just wanted to give a full acknowledgement, and thanks for the massive turnout by the community in support of the library, which always happens. This amazing organization. I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Senator Gary Peters and his team for coming out to visit with us this week at the fire department, working with us on fire funding and public safety funding on the level, meeting with City Manager Talaferro and Chief Carson, just kind of discuss the future of the different things we need to keep everyone safe. There was some displays and tours and all those types of things, and now moving forward in the areas of funding for enhancements and really just replenishment of a lot of the things that have been grant funded in the past, and revisiting that from a federal perspective, as well as just a great deal of support for all the difficult times in the community otherwise. We just want to thank Senator Peters and his team for the visit and for their continued engagement with us as a community moving forward. Definitely want to say congratulations to the basketball team as well. One of the best games ever last night, if people weren't able to engage in that, about just a bunch of really great kids and gritty kids going up against a really difficult Kalamazoo Central team, highly ranked, and they pulled out that game in overtime last night. It's just a great group of kids. Let's see here. From Noel Garcia, his absence tonight, he wanted me to acknowledge one of his students, Sam Kendall, a former East Lansing High School graduate of 2017. Noel's with the Wilson Talent Center tonight, inducting this young man into their Hall of Fame. So I just wanted to for me to make an acknowledgement of that, and that's his absence tonight. And he just wanted to be present because he was the nominee, and this is just a young man he has a great affinity for, and is now a member of Lansing Police Department, and he wanted to be there to support this individual. And that's all I have.
Mayor, would this be an appropriate time to move to give Councilperson Garcia an excused absence?
Sure.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. City Manager's report.
Good evening, Mayor. Members of the audience and council, members of council. I wanted to also echo your sentiments about the 100th anniversary for the library and the fire department and the event that was put on. It was a wonderful event, and the community support was it was very significant, and we thank you for that. Also for Senator Peters and meeting with fire department staff and to help promote the SAFER grant and the AFG grant to assist with needs in public safety. I also wanted to acknowledge Peter and Nicole, because I know they are here this evening, and it's been referenced that they have resigned, and I just wanted to say thank you for all of your hard work. It has been my pleasure to work with each and every one of you. I do appreciate you, and it was alluded to that you've become a friend to some of the members of the audience, but I think we also, I would say the same thing in many respects. I've known many of you, I mean some of you for years, and I think I would count it as a friendship as well. To that end, I want to acknowledge that I think that retirement and or resignations are very personal, and people like to deal with them differently. Some people ask that it be there be no hoopla, that there be no big announcement, that they like to keep it private, and I try to operate within their requests. I try not to comment on it many times at their request, and but I can say that I've enjoyed working with each and every one of them. I understand that they are making decisions for their own personal reasons. I do sit down and talk with each and every one of them to see if there is something that could be done to accommodate them, if they have things that would make us work and operate better, if they have ideas, suggestions. So we certainly are aware of the retention issues and some of the things that are happening. I think that we'll have strategies to try to deal with that, but to some extent that is natural when there's a change of leadership, but it doesn't mean it makes me happy to see them go. In fact, I think we have a wonderful staff here at the City of East Lansing, and I think everyone worked very hard to try to meet the needs of the residents. And I think that will still be the case. And so, I just choose to kind of soldier on, and I think our staff does as well, and we'll continue to do that. And we'll wish everybody the best that, again, makes the decisions that they make, but there's no pressure to make those decisions. We certainly recognize those can be difficult decisions. And so I'll segue to, I think, Mayor, if I could, to kind of prime the business agenda, because I think that is a good, there's some application here as well. And I know it's Peter and your team, if you want to begin to come forward, is that appropriate for 4.1? I see I'm just before, I have the comments, my communication just before the business agenda, so I could at least have them present, and I can, before you start on that, we'll get the authorization. But what I would say is that the reason this item with Valley Court and the RAP grant was put on the agenda was because there was a requirement or a request to sign a contract with MEDC, I think it was, on the 15th. There was obviously some concern about whether to sign that contract and proceed without having further direction from council and further opportunity to discuss. We are very much aware of the fact that we're operating with a lean staff and a staff that has been taxed and working very hard and candidly are getting exhausted on certain things. And so I ask that we pause at this moment to see if there is a desire to continue to move forward, given some of the new price estimates and some of the other challenges with the project itself, even as we recognize that there's a grant that we may or may not receive. It was worth a discussion because there has been so much work and it has been so much effort of staff, and I wanted to see if we needed to continue down that path, if there was a desire to do that, or if there was an opportunity to use staff time in other areas. I know that this is difficult when you see an agenda item. There may be some suspicions that there's an attempt to move something through very quickly without transparency. That is not what is happening here. We are bringing it forward because of the request to sign a contract that gave us some concern, given some of the new price estimates and some of the other priorities within the city. So I understand that there are risks to the budget. There are things that we do not know with the Board of Water Light and staff time. All those things are why we brought this issue forward. And so I think it's our hope and our staff's hope to try to get clear direction if we should continue or to proceed, if we should table the issue, or if we should discontinue the work altogether. And so that was why you see it on the agenda. We can make some recommendations, may have recommendations on that, but we wanted to at least have that conversation and have it for the very reason of having it be very transparent. So I don't know if it's protocol in this meeting to read the full agenda and then come back to that, but if not, we could move right to 4.1.
Okay. Next up on the business agenda, item 4.1, consideration of revitalization and placemaking, RAP grant, Valley Court Park. And I'll jump in, Peter, before you get all the way started. I think just so everyone understands this, from the difficulties of kind of staffing a city, and my understanding long term, I think all these individuals, just the city structure and the way where staffing went from kind of through the heyday till now, and the amount of work and multiplication of work on the individuals inside of the city is just immense. The difference in staffing counts for a city at this point are hundreds of people different than when many of the individuals who started in the roles that they're in today. So I'm always amazed at the ability to to do the work that they do with the proficiency, efficiency, and professionalism they do, and not burn out at a greater rate, regardless of change in leadership and that kind of thing. There's a high degree of burnout in this, and I think none of this is occurring in a vacuum. We have leadership change. We're coming out of a tragic incident where people are reconsidering a lot of things around their lives, and so it is a multiplicity, kind of to the individual from the. If you ask every one of these individuals candidly, there's many different reasons, and they have every right to every one of those individual reasons. But one of those reasons started a long time ago when staffing in cities goes down by not tens of people, staffing in cities have gone down by hundreds of people, and so these individuals are holding roles. I used to say it jokingly, like you have like 3 different jobs that you're carrying at any individual time. So we will respect you will see the vision coming forth. We will respect their individual choices and decision making, and I respect the work that everyone's already done, because the stress is immense and challenging, and the work is very challenging. So I respect every moment that they do in this. So I'll never do anything to disparage it or create some narrative, because obviously in a brief period of time the clarity on the direction through the city manager process will be transparent, as well as how we move forward in staffing. And hopefully even when this question today is the beginning of conversation around the kind of a return, one of those priorities is a return to prioritization of staff count, redundancy, and things like that, so one individual doesn't have every single piece of this fall on them, nor are they the entirety of any single project where they're to the point where they can't make any other life choices or decisions. That we're all dedicated to the city of East Lansing, but the setup and the amount of pressure on individual staff and it's not fair. It's not prescriptive. It's not right, and that will be a priority that you'll see coming forward as we move forward, doing better to protect staff and trying to find what that right number looks like as we move forward in the budgetary and putting people first in budget and in every other process. And that's something that is a priority. So you'll see that, and that'll be the priority of whoever takes the city manager seat moving forward. And that's City Manager Teleferro's priority right now is the people. So that's what you'll see. And now I'll throw to you, Peter.
My name is Peter Menser. I'm the Planning and Zoning Administrator for the city. I have a very brief presentation. It's already on screen, so I'm going to run through this. And I very much appreciate the preamble from the manager and our mayor. The other thing I just want to acknowledge is that we're very much aware that there are pending applications for Valley Court, for the grant and for the Valley Court project itself. So there's a site plan application out there, and there are also applications for certificates of appropriateness at the Historic District Commission. Tonight's meeting is not intended to bypass that process whatsoever. This was kind of as Manager Telefaro mentioned, this is a check-in, and in terms like a policy direction check-in with council. So we very much, depending on the direction identified by council tonight, would very much, if we choose to move ahead with the grant, we would very much go through the process and resolve those permits, I'll say. So just want to have that out there. So, all right, next, please.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Is my understanding correct that if we proceed with this, the city has to sign a contract or agreement or something with the state tomorrow? Is that the deadline?
Yeah, so there's a grant agreement, I'm going to get to that, but there's a grant agreement that we need to sign with, that ultimately the city manager needs to sign with MEDC. That grant agreement is not a binding, it's binding in the sense that we're signing and we're committing to move forward with the grant, but it's not a binding, you have to do the project now, you have to commit the money is spent if you sign this document. It is merely I shouldn't say merely, I've learned not to use qualifiers. It's a commitment to move forward with the grant and to proceed with the project, but it's certainly not holding us accountable. There is an off-ramp there. It's a document that outlines the kind of rules and procedures of the grant, and that's what, if you choose to do so, you'd be signing. So Tony may want to chime in further on that, but I'll touch on that at the end.
Peter,
yes.
For clarity, originally, we were given a deadline of the 15th, and we asked if that was a hard deadline or if we had, if it could be extended. And we were told it could be extended, but by the time we were told that, we had set this meeting and we wanted to move forward. But initially, it was given to us as a hard deadline
Yeah.
for the 15th.
Yeah, we did learn that there is some wiggle room there. I don't know if it's a week or 2 weeks, but MEDC is willing to work with us in this as we figure the direction out. So we can learn more about that if it's necessary.
Well, before we launch off on this, so there's quote wiggle room, end quote, but we don't know how much there is.
Right.
We have nothing in writing from them with regard to that. We find out about this wiggle room after this was placed on the agenda. Is that my interpretation?
It is, yeah. And
Okay.
really, I'd committed to many community members that we were going to have this meeting and talking about it for a while.
Yeah, I get that. So now, before we go any further, because this is the first I heard tonight that maybe this wasn't a commitment if we signed it. Mr. City Attorney, are you comfortable expressing a verbal opinion tonight about the concreteness of the agreement if we sign it?
Sure. So first of all, we did notice this as a special regular meeting, so you have the authority, first of all. The second thing is I did review the grant agreement and the obligations. You know, the idea is that if we move forward with this and you authorize the city manager to sign it, there's an expectation that we would move forward with the project. But that being said, I think Peter is correct that if we fail to do so, it merely makes us likely not have as good of a reputation with the MEDC, but we likely would not be obligated to move forward with expending up to the $1 million match of the $1 million fund.
And I'll expand on that because I did have that direct question to the MEDC staff that if we choose not to move ahead with this grant, does this disqualify the city for any future MEDC grants? And the answer was a very resounding no. So it might be an inconvenience, but it certainly wouldn't disqualify us from future opportunities. I'm going to proceed. Feel free to ask more questions along the way. I'm just trying tonight to give you an overview of kind of where we are and how we got here. Really this started as an initiative to plan for the Valley Court area. This is several years ago. There were the beginnings of a discussion about how looking at the larger area around Valley Court Park, not to install a pavilion or other amenities, but just to plan for the area. That didn't happen. I believe it was interrupted by COVID. That preceded my time at the city. But there was kind of like a plan to plan, and then it didn't move forward. And instead, at some point, a grant opportunity came along, so attention was directed towards this grant through the MEDC. And I've got some dates here. In January, council approved the staff just to move forward with preparing the grant, and then in March, council approved a letter of support and then a certification of funds. By certification, I mean a letter just certifying that there are funds available for a matching grant. It's a 1-to-1 matching grant requirement. In June, the grant was applied for by city staff, and in September, they were notified that the project was selected up to $1 million in funding. Next, please. So the intent behind the grant generally, and I know that there's been some discussions about the language that was in the grant application, and I can't speak to that directly, but the general intent was to activate the space of Valley Court Park, support placemaking efforts in the downtown, and connecting the downtown to the park following that realignment of Albert Street and the construction of the Park District project and the construction of MSU FCU project. The work to date has included a lot of public meetings. We've got a draft site plan, and really we've got a phase 2 of draft site plan. There are draft architectural renderings, and there have been some changes to those plans since the initial draft. All of those are attached in the meeting packet. Sometimes those plans don't show as well on the large overhead, but you'll find those in the meeting packet tonight. So the project cost, when the grant application was filed, there was a total estimated project cost of about $2.5 million. That was, a year ago, and their prices are expected to increase with rising construction and material prices. In terms of funding commitments, so far the DDA made a commitment to fund $100,000 towards the local match, and City Council has indicated support to match the rest of it. And that's all I know pending exhaustion of other funding sources. Those other sources have not been explored to any great depth, but I don't want to say that there isn't something out there or other grants that we may be able to seek to find additional funding for this. But I don't have those costs identified today. Next to timeline, please. Okay, there's some deadlines from the MEDC on time. Really what it boils down to is by the end of July in 2024, this project must commence, a project that's funded by MEDC, and then by the end of 2026, project must be completed. There are the remaining to-do items that I've identified, and I'm sure there are more, but generally finalizing site plan, as you've heard from residents, and if you've read the communications that have been submitted to date, there are a lot of different opinions on where this project may go, and tweaks to the different amenities that are proposed at this time, and the layout, and kind of whether or not even what's on the plan should be there. So finalizing that is certainly crucial. Finalizing the building specifications. You'll see some draft documents in the packet that are one idea of how things could look if we choose to move ahead. Preparing bid documents, bidding the project to find a contractor, and then commencing site work all need to happen. So we're still in a relatively early phase of this grant and the project that accompanies it. Community input. In the presentation, if any of you have seen it yet, it's in the meeting packet. I have a lot of dates listed here, and I'm just trying to give an overview of where this has gone. I absolutely recognize and acknowledge that this is not enough, and it didn't maybe happen at the right time. But to date, where we've been with this, well, certainly I want to note there are many pages of written communications in your meeting packet. I will summarize those. I will do my best to summarize those and say it's a mixed reaction so far. There are some positives, there are some negatives. Some things that you'll note that are mentioned often, and I don't want to. Please read all the letters, but loss of green space, too much parking, and folks desire a performance space in the plan. And there are, those have been addressed to a certain extent, but I don't think we're there yet. There is support from the Parks and Recreational Advisory Commission. There's a letter in your meeting packet tonight. I want to recognize that. And then I won't read all these, but really I'm just noting that the staff has been at a farmer's market to collect perceptions and, not perceptions, that's the wrong word, opinions, feedback on the kind of draft plan. The Planning Commission has reviewed this and provided comments a couple times. The Downtown Development Authority reviewed the plans at a meeting in last October. There was a neighborhood open house at the Valley Court Community Center. It was pretty sparsely attended. There were several city staff there, but it was in the afternoon during the week. We didn't get a lot of people there. There was a meeting, online meeting with market vendors, and Planning Commission, Historic District Commission, Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission. There have been a lot of eyes on this project, but definitely recognizing that not enough and not everybody. So I wanted to present a couple, I never want to provide kind of some options because I feel like that's my role here. So one of the options is to move ahead with the grant. But what some of the related challenges to that are, and as was mentioned this evening, there are potential staff limitations to this. We may need to bring a consultant firm in to tackle some of the work that I described earlier. There is a tight time frame. Getting under construction by the end of 2024 might be challenging. It's not, neither of those things are impossible, and I speak, I guess, I may not be here, but I'm speaking for staff that we definitely have the appetite and ability to carry this out should we move ahead. And one of the challenges is definitely a mixed reaction from the community, not only with just kind of the premise of the project, the binary yes, no, should we do this, but also with the current design as you're seeing it now in the meeting packet. And then the source of the local match. There's approximately $1.4 million that are currently unspecified. The big question is, where does this money come from? I don't have an answer to that, but I think it could be tackled. And also, I'll see the bright side of things, look at some opportunities that have come out of this and that we may be able to use moving forward. There has been quite a bit of preliminary design work started. We've got a good relationship with a design firm that understands the site, that has heard from a lot of people in the community, and I think are geared to potentially tweak the plan to reflect the community preferences that have been shared so far. So a lot of that work has been done. It doesn't mean there's not more to do, but we have gotten here, and it's not without kind of product at the end. There is a chance to change the project scope with MEDC. I don't have firm parameters on this, and we can always get more information. But I'm told that there is. I mean, we're committed to a project at this site. I think changing the site would be challenging. But if we were to tweak the design of the building itself, or maybe move or change some of the elements. That's all within, I guess they call it value engineering now. That's all within the scope of what's allowed with the MEDC. And if you want more information on that, we can have someone from the MEDC come to a meeting and explain further. Our staff can certainly scope that out. One of the opportunities is there's engaged community. Obviously, a lot of people have eyes on this project. We have a lot of stakeholders at the table. So I do think that is a positive moving forward, to have so many people together that obviously have an opinion and want to have a vision for how this site may be used in the future. And there's momentum. When I talked earlier about kind of how this all started, I think there is a momentum to start over with a general vision for Valley Court and provide more of an organic involvement with neighbors and stakeholders, and really lean heavily on the tools that we've got, and community feedback and design work. All of that could inform, that's been done today, all of that could inform future efforts moving forward. And certainly engaging further with the community, whether it's a direct mailing to the neighborhood, holding some open idea sessions, sending a survey out, holding focus groups. All of that can be a large part of how we might tackle this in the future. And then, as I mentioned, the work to date can be used, whether if we don't move ahead tonight, work to date could be used in future grant or project opportunities. So I don't want to, I guess, let all of the work and the voices that have come out so far fall away. So Commissioner Brookover, or Councilmember Brookover, mentioned the grant agreement. It outlines the terms and conditions of the grant. It doesn't commit to financing the project, but it is an important step in the MEDC allocation of how they're spending their money. So to me, it represents a crossroads and commitment from council, which is why we've diverted kind of the other path and come here tonight to talk about the big picture. This grant agreement does need City Council approval to authorize the manager to sign it. The agreement is due in March 15th, which is tomorrow, but MEDC noted the delay is acceptable. I don't have the specific number for you right now. And I have, just as we always write motions in the affirmative, have provided a motion for consideration in the staff memo. So there's a lot of information attached to the meeting packet tonight. I am available to answer any questions you might have, at least to the best of my ability.
Questions?
I don't have any questions, because I've had the honor of sitting through a lot of the evolution of this project, because I am the liaison to the Parks Commission. So just kind of also making myself available to answer any process questions that anybody has questions about. I think that really what is needed from this body tonight is just kind of a affirmation that there's still an enthusiasm to move forward with this project in whatever form it finally takes, versus not having, if this body is not interested in seeing this completed in this space, then I think this is the time to let staff know, because they certainly have, I know Kathy DeChambeau and Assistant Director Longpree have done an incredible outreach to our commissions to just kind of shop this around, I would say, to our various bodies. And if ultimately the answer is going to be no, then we would like to stop doing that outreach, because there's a lot of things happening in our different commissions. I am in favor of this. I can express the reasons that I am, understanding that there is a lot of anxiety in the community about making sure that space, which is definitely our premier park in the downtown area, is respected. So I don't know if that's useful, but I can.
Well, I definitely I don't want to put Kathy or anyone on the spot. There's a lot of sweat equity into this already. So that's I'd want to know the direction that, particularly from Parks, is feeling, the ability to adapt and pivot, and if there's other interests, that's kind of my interest from what was the conversations that came out of maybe the Parks meetings. Or,
yeah. Well, I mean, Director DeChambeau is obviously very capable of speaking for herself, but I will say that, from a staff perspective, there's absolutely no interest in building something that the community won't enjoy, right? So the ultimate goal here is not to spend $1 million of the state's money, but it is to create an amenity in our central downtown neighborhood that will be engaging and activating to our community members that live around it. So there's really no interest in moving forward with something that won't be supported. So.
Well, I have no enthusiasm for doing this project at this point in time. And towards that end, in order to get the discussion going or terminated, because I have to make the motion to continue the discussion in the positive, and I'm not going to support it when I vote, I move to authorize the city manager to sign the grant agreement to proceed with the RAP grant for Valley Court Park.
I'll second that.
Discussion.
I have a few questions. So if we agree for tomorrow, how long before we have to start doing something?
I guess I don't have a specific date. I think it would behoove us to move quickly. It takes a lot of time to get all the, we would have to, I think, get right back at design. It's hard to pin down an exact time, but I think we should be on it within the next couple weeks to really jump back into refining the design, getting meetings scheduled with stakeholders, and everything I outlined earlier.
I could just weigh in on that as well. Yeah, so that's one of the terms of the agreement we certainly have, I certainly have concern with. The committed date of July 31, 2024, and then the completion date of the end of 2026. The problem that I see there is that those are very close to ARPA deadlines, and this type of construction is going on everywhere. And so we're really engaging in a very competitive market for other large construction projects, bigger than this, but of a similar vein for other communities. We are running full steam to make sure that we can hit that completion date and get vendors that are actually interested in getting the funding committed. And another piece of that is we are getting $1 million to go with our $1 million, although we need $1 million more than that for the total project cost. But I was just speaking with Kathy and Ms. Longpre about this yesterday, about the incredible escalation we're seeing in bids as a result. So we're getting money, but we may be spending a lot more than the typical market cost would be. And so that just kind of weighs into my concerns as far as the form of the contract, solely as it relates to those deadlines.
If I could also, that was, I think, our shared concern, that as the price is escalating, is it worth it to pursue the grant, recognizing that there would still be perhaps a heavier financial commitment from the city? And I think that in any event, Peter tried to, I think, allude to that a no at this moment doesn't mean a no indefinitely or in perpetuity. It would be turning down this grant, but obviously we would seek other grants if there was a desire in the future. But we were just concerned if this was the right time to continue, or if we should table that work at this moment.
So, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off in your questions, Dana. So one of the things that's come up repeatedly in public comment that is, I guess, so there's room for change in the plan if we stick with the idea that this pavilion will, on the farmers market day, serve as a farmers market pavilion. We've taken the amended site plan in our packet has taken as much parking out of it as we possibly can. One of the reasons that there was an interest in building a more permanent structure for the farmers market is because it is really not very well accommodated on the site as it currently sits. We have our vendors use heavier than normal trucks because they're frequently farm work trucks. They frequently come with trailers, And those trailers are being pulled across our lawn, across the mowed area of Valley Court Park frequently in very muddy conditions, which is stressful for the vendors and it's stressful for staff managing that traffic there. So although the amount of pavement in the picture is a little shocking, I will definitely acknowledge that. Part of that is because one of the intended purposes of that pavilion is to have the farmers market, not visitors, but vendors accommodated on that site. So what we see here has taken out all of the public parking, and it's also taken out 4 food truck parking spots that were adjacent to that farmers market traffic parking to cut down as much pavement as possible. But if we did want to go forward with the idea that this would accommodate the farmers market, it's got as the pavement has to stay essentially. So if that's the primary complaint, then the final project would not be a farmers market pavilion. So.
The courts, is that a pickleball court or a tennis court?
I think it's a basketball court.
On the far side, not the one that's on the rendering.
Oh, that's a tennis court to the far east.
Are we adding overall, if you know, for the parking areas throughout the city, are we adding a basketball court, or has any basketball courts been taken away?
The basketball court is the one that was on the plan, or the one that's existed there is still there.
Okay.
It's still on the plan.
And so I'm just asking, like, sometimes an idea is to take something away from a park, like maybe Patriarch Park, and then put it maybe in this plan to say we rebuilt it. So I'm just asking, are we subtracting, if you know, or Jesse, okay, any quotes?
I don't think any basketball amenities have been taken out.
Right.
And actually this site, so right now the farmers market is on that basketball court.
Mm-hmm.
So this plan leaves the basketball court free during the market hours, and it moves the market next to it. I see Director DeChambeau is moving forward.
and Arts. Councilmember Watson, the basketball court that's existing in this project will stay existing, so that is there. And when you refer to Patriarch Park, the current sports court project that is there has redone the existing basketball court, which very much needed it. So that's part of that project. And if I may just address the issue of sweat equity, I appreciate that you brought that up, because it's true that a lot of staff hours have been put into this project. But what I would say as public servants is that sweat equity is what we do. It's part of our jobs for every project that we do, because we can't get both the public and council the information that you need to make sound decisions unless we put in that sweat equity. That's what we're here for. So I don't think that hours into a project is what we should, that's just the norm, that's the baseline, that's how we get here, and we get you the information so that you can make sound decisions. So I just want to kind of make that clarity. If there's anything else, happy to come back.
Peter, when you mentioned consultants would need to be added for this to be successful?
I was just saying that I think that's one option. So if we don't have a team that's available, again, I'm not wandering into politics about jobs or anything, but I was just noting that one option, it would be if we needed to supplement our team, we could find a consultant team to help.
Do we know how much that might be?
I have not looked into that, no.
And does anyone else know, like, an approximate number for, how much it would cost us?
Well, we just hired somebody for $18,000 to head our city manager search, but we've had other RFPs come back like $80,000, so it's all over the map. I don't think it kind of depends on what services are needed. So.
Yeah, I would say it would hinge very much on the scope of the work and whether it's, facilitating discussions and sessions for community feedback, or if you're getting into design work and engineering and those things, it would probably be more costly.
Okay.
I'm sure scope of work would dictate that.
I have two more questions, maybe. I might have more. How often does this $1 million type grant come along?
I haven't seen many. I think ARPA's a relatively kind of unicorn. So I'm not anticipating many more infrastructure placemaking grants of that size coming along, but I will admit I don't track them on a regular basis. But then again, I haven't seen something of this volume in my career.
I forgot my last question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I do remember, sorry. It seems like there was a gap in the timeline. Like, you know how the person came up about HDC and it seemed like they weren't circled back to? Like, that's what I was hearing. And then when you look at the timeline, it seems like there was a gap, but was that, normal or because of staffing and...
I can explain. I was at the meetings with the Historic District Commission. I think a lot of it had to do with we just don't have a lot of that information yet. So rather, before we sink, all right, sink is not the right word again. I have to self-monitor here. Before we spend more money on design, which is not cheap, we wanted to get more input from the rest of other groups in the community. So there are the level of detail needed at the Historic District Commission level, which I very much recognize is integral to them making an informed decision, is significantly more than we have now. But that means the next level of design to get there. So we're just not there yet. I mean, the plan would be, if we chose to move ahead, to circle back, to move on to the next level of design and circle back to all of these groups with more information.
Thank you.
I'm going to vote against this for 5 reasons. First one kind of ties into something Nicole McPherson taught me. $1 million here and $1 million there, pretty soon you're talking real money. And it's already been said, but there's been no range put on it. But I learned early on from the engineers at the Water Sewer Authority who put bids out before ARPA for various projects that when the bids started coming back, all of a sudden the costs escalated. And so I think various people have mentioned that already tonight. We don't have a range, but I don't think it's $1 million. I think it's going to be 1.5 million is what I think. Number 2, so thanks, Nicole, for teaching me that. Number 2, and I appreciate what Kathy said, we don't have enough staff. We don't have enough staff time. And she's absolutely correct about sweat equity, but at this point, I think we had better be using our workforce's sweat equity for something else that maybe is more significant to the city. And the third thing probably ties into what I just said, which is, I've read all the comments. I've been at Historic District Commission meetings. There's not any overwhelming support for this project that I can see in the community. Do some people want it, like my partner down here? Sure. Is it a neat thing to do at some point, doing something? Yes. But is it this project at this point in time? I don't think so. And I don't think there's anywhere close to a majority of people in East Lansing that support it. The fourth thing is, look, my attitude is green space is green space. And I was really surprised when we started looking at this project at how much Valley Court had already been chipped away for the last 25, 30 years. Frankly, I don't even know when it happened. But we used to have the Michigan Festival down there. We had a lot of different things. Kids in elementary school could go down there and play a baseball game, sandlot baseball game. You really can't do that anymore because there's play equipment where the outfield would be. And I don't know, when my kids were growing up, nobody ever could do anything without having a, quote, coach. But it seems to me we ought to have the recreational space available for kids to go do kid things. And then finally, the grant terms kind of worry me a little bit. And just to point out one thing, so in section 3 of this grant that we're talking about authorizing the city manager to sign tomorrow, it says, Article 5, default and remedies. It says, one of the things that default can be any representation made by the grantee which is incorrect in any material respect, including but not limited to any representation or warranty provided in this agreement, including Article 3, any information provided in the application, or any information provided in support of reimbursement requests. Now, I don't think anything that was done in the application was intentional, but you've already heard one speaker tonight. But if you go back to Section 3, Section 3.5 says, litigation or other proceedings, except has been disclosed in writing to the MSF to the knowledge of the grantee, there are no suits or proceedings pending, or to the knowledge of the grantee threatened by or before any court, governmental commission, board, bureau, or any other administrative agency or tribunal, which if resolved against the grantee, that's us, that's the city, that's you, would have a material adverse effect on the financial condition or business of the grantee, or impair the grantee's ability to perform its obligations under the agreement. And that's what we call a disjunctive. We have two pieces of outstanding litigation against us that I consider to potentially be a material risk. Now, my definition of material risk for you guys as taxpayers may be different than what the accountants would call material risk, and I defer to the city attorney, but when I see language like that with all the other kind of stuff that's around on this thing, that makes me nervous. So those are the 5 reasons why I'm going to vote against it tonight. I really appreciate all the work everybody's done on this. I think people have really, gone above and beyond. And it was a nice thing to think about, but there's a whole lot of other things we need to think about in this city right now.
My only real challenge with this is obviously giving something the community actually wants, which is very, very difficult to find something that we all want. Second, that we protect the green space, but kind of more importantly, in these processes and just the way municipalities and cities work, it's very difficult to work within the market. And I've seen that kind of as I look back through our history, we've had some really difficult times. Some of our things that challenge us now, we're kind of working against markets and ending up at the top of markets and doing things that were not well timed. So the timing of this feels very eerily similar to things that I look back on former councils as not being judicious with the timing of the decision, even though it was a great decision, and many things we enjoyed today are from those really hard and tough decisions, but the timing made the economies of scale on some of this stuff a little rough. So that's my real objection to this. I don't want to look down the road at the economies a year from now, and any decisions that we're making right now, they're all tough decisions, but I don't think anybody can even predict which way this whole thing's going to go, and which dollars are going to be more important and less important. And as we've kind of the theme of this meeting, I think if I'm investing more dollars, it's towards staff, towards retention, towards support, towards those kinds of things. So even putting additional dollars at this moment at risk is not a great feeling for me. So that's my objections. I won't kind of predict which way that I'll vote, but I'll say that's some pretty big objections. And really my only thing holding my attention is the work of kind of the will and work of Parks and others who put a lot into this. And one of my big non-concerns is what the MEDC. We can go back to the table with the MEDC, and we'll do other things and have a bright future there as well, working with our other partners and legislatively and whatever to find dollars and support projects for the future. So that's really a non-concern for me, even though this is a substantial commitment by the MEDC. I think that relationship will be fine. That's not a deterrent for me in that. It's just there's no way to say we're not at the top of a market or even a bubble that we're sitting on. So this part to be considered.
Mayor, to that point, and to answer, provide perhaps another answer to Councilperson Watson's question about the grant. I think that the city as a whole is very aggressive in pursuing grants that are the right types of grants. So you don't want to pursue grants just for the sake of pursuing them and take you off mission. And I know you understand that. But the point I'm making is simply that while there may have been limited grants for a project just like this, we still look for other grant opportunities, and sometimes if we find those grant opportunities, they will free up money through the general fund for projects like this at a later date. So I think there are other grant opportunities that may not be directly applicable to this, but could influence decisions at some time later if you did decide to pursue, or if you don't decide to do that this evening.
And then this raises a question for me, seeing that we're at an even number tonight with the extension. If I don't want to have this be a push. Could we move this item?
If you chose to, I think that we would be good until the 21st, if necessary.
So I think that's a more fair thing to do. I could see where this ends up in a tie or a push and something like that. I don't want to really go there at this time and have it be pushed, but we can bring it back around to either have it discharged or.
Yeah. Mr. Mincer, you won't be with us on the 21st, or you will be?
I will not be.
Okay. But you have been very thorough in your presentation tonight, which we appreciate.
Thank you.
And all the best in your new position.
Thank you.
I appreciated some of Councilmember Brookover's, many of his points, and the choice to do things with money right now with the state that we're in right now for the city of East Lansing. It's hard for me to say yes, because that puts pressure on people that are here. But I really appreciate imagining that we can revisit this at some point when we're in a more stable place in the city. But I am a huge fan of Meridian Township's Farmers Market, and I remember when they were on the sidewalk and it was muddy and it was messy, and then they moved to like across the street by Meridian Mall or in that parking lot, and it's still beautiful and fun, and some vendors can be drier at times. So yeah, I appreciate the work. It's just hard for me to agree to it today.
So to Council or Mayor Bacon, we do have a moved and seconded motion on the floor, and so I think that we're in a position to vote on this unless Mr. Brookover wants to rescind his motion.
Respectfully, no, I don't want to withdraw the motion.
Okay.
And Mr. City Attorney, my understanding is a tie vote defeats the motion, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. This is a motion to approve moving forward. A no vote would be against it. You would need 3 votes.
Further discussion?
I just want to say thank you, Peter. Thanks for answering your phone yesterday and answering some of my questions and just all of my thinking that happens, and you responding to my emails and just feeling like an ally in this work and helping me understand something that you've done day in and day out, and that I do my day work and I do my council work. So I appreciate you, and good luck to you. Thanks for being with us.
Appreciate that.
All right. With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks.
Next up, discussion, Crown Castle, 5G small cell towers.
Good evening. My name's Thomas Musgrove. I am Government Affairs Manager for Crown Castle for Michigan, local and state. We want to talk about our project here this evening based on some of the feedback that we've heard from constituents, and we've had the opportunity to speak to a couple members of council at this point. My presentation pretty much covers three things here this evening, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may happen to have. The first thing is, I want to tell you a little bit about the company, who we are, what we do. Then we'll get into the need for small cells and why they're important for connectivity in neighborhoods. And then finally, we'll get into some more specifics about this project here in East Lansing, because I definitely heard some of the concerns from the residents. Next slide, please. So Crown Castle is the largest provider of shared communication infrastructure. And I use the term shared communication infrastructure because it was alluded to in some of the comments from residents. And what that means is when we design and build infrastructure, whether it be a cell tower, small cell, fiber networks, we do it with the intent of making sure that it's co-locatable once it's constructed. It'll be designed and built for multiple carriers. It's marketed that way to other carriers. And the expectation is once we would build one small cell, that it makes it a little bit more palatable for carrier number 2 or carrier number 3 to use that piece of infrastructure in lieu of having to build their own new small cell. So ultimately, the goal is to reduce the number of pieces of infrastructure in your public right-of-way. Next slide, please. So I mentioned we're the largest. We have over 85,000 route miles of fiber, 40,000 cell towers across the United States. We have approximately 115,000 small cells either on air or in development. And all those small cells are located in over 700 municipalities across the United States. So in the next few slides, I'd like to talk about the need for small cells and why they're important. Go to the next one. I think this slide here tells a lot about the need. We've seen exponential growth in the number of devices used by individuals. And that's just not just your phone, it's the wearables, it's all the other applications that are in our cars and on our refrigerators and everything else that we have available to us at this point. The middle one talks about the wearables, and then the other big part is when we talk about innovation and economic development. All of the different technologies that will come out based on 5G networks will significantly increase the number of connections that an antenna has to connect to. So when you start compounding all these devices, it does one thing. It drains the network down. And what we have to do, because there's not enough available macro towers, the large towers, the 200-foot towers, is that we are augmenting communications infrastructure in districts by placing small cells. They're smaller, they're more discrete, but they're a little bit closer to the end user. And the part of that is because we talk about the term, it's called latency. So it's the reflexivity of a network, the ability for something to go from your phone to that antenna and then back to your phone in a manner that is very quick. With the towers being maybe over a mile or a mile and a half away, you cannot get that signal to the tower, back to the cloud, back to the antenna in a timely manner. So when you have all these devices and we have all this drag on the network, that kind of demonstrates the need for small cells. Next slide, please. And why are they important? I know, the invention of the Apple iPhone was important because we all started to learn how to use all these apps, and everybody's using apps on their phone. But two of the major talking points that we typically bring up when we have the opportunity to present is pretty much in that top left-hand corner. 50% of homes do not have landlines anymore. 80% of 911 calls come from mobile devices. And many of those calls to first responders go to their mobile devices. So what we're trying to do is improve the ability to communicate when we most need it. I tend to think of a small cell as the evolution of the telephone pole. We have telephone poles and we have landlines to home, but 50% of homes don't have landlines anymore. So how do you provide that connectivity? We do it via small cells and using poles. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there's a whole bunch of different applications that will be coming out in the relatively near future. I mean, 5G is pretty new. It's not really completely all over the place yet. But it does two things for the community of East Lansing. It provides opportunity for innovation and economic development. Without the infrastructure available, you kind of get behind the curve of connectivity and opportunity in your neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So as we think about these networks, they all kind of have to work together. The towers do a very good job of providing coverage over large geographic areas, and now we're using the small cells to kind of augment the coverage, and we use the term capacity to be able to offload all of this data consumption that people are using on their day-to-day devices. And they work in concert together, and they're all connected by fiber optic cable. Next slide. So here's the project in East Lansing, and I heard questions about co-location and utilizing existing infrastructure. So on this project, we have looked at the existing infrastructure in East Lansing. We have 54 total locations that we're proposing. 28 of them will be used on existing infrastructure, where we either co-locate on the existing pole or just have to replace the pole for kind of a like-for-like look to it. The picture on the left up there shows an existing light post in the right-of-way. The pole next to it just shows the antennas attached to the top of it. Same thing with the wood pole on the right-hand side of it. We have a wood pole that's, just looks like a regular wood pole, and we would be proposing a wood pole. That way it blends into the streetscape. You don't want a metal pole where you have all wood poles, and vice versa. You can see that we are proposing 15 either co-location or replacement poles of the metal type and 14 of the wood. Next slide, please. So new poles, we have to propose new poles whenever there isn't, the term we would use in the industry would be called technically feasible. There's not the opportunity to either co-locate on an existing pole. That could be for reasons that there's maybe primary power on the pole, or there's nothing in the general vicinity that we could attach our antenna and equipment to be able to provide the most efficient and effective network. As we've designed this project, we were given the region to be able to provide this coverage and capacity for the carrier, and what we did was provide the most efficient version of that. We do not want to build extra small cells. We want to build it most efficiently and effectively. Next slide. So I know that there were questions about the map. Here is the map, and I just literally got this over the weekend. I wanted to make sure that it was part of the public record for today's meeting. What you can see, and it's a little bit hard to see from here, but we're showing all the locations where the poles are proposed, and then additionally we color-coded it to be able to identify which one's a new pole, which one's a replacement pole, and that way it's part of the public record. It'll be in the agenda tomorrow's meeting, or after tonight's meeting, and the constituents here will have visibility to those locations and the pole types. Next slide. As for timeline, I know that there's been some questions about an application submitted. As of today, we have not submitted any applications for permits to the city. The notifications are based on an FCC requirement that whenever you're within a vicinity of residential neighborhoods, you're required to do a Section 106 notification, and those were the notifications that the residents saw in the local paper. Yes, the first one came out between Christmas and New Year's, but we've continued to post them ever since as we've had construction drawings ready, and we've kind of getting closer to launching this project. The timeline of what we're looking at is, again, we haven't submitted for permits yet, so we're still in design and permitting, and we know that, based on some of the staff challenges that we're hearing, we're going to do our best to work with the city to make sure that, we're not overburdening city staff that's already overtaxed. And then the intent would be to construct maybe later in this year, maybe in the fall sometime. And then afterwards, because we have infrastructure in the right of way, we need to make sure that we have people that are able and in the community to maintain it. So we have a network operations center that's open 24/7, 365, so we can answer any questions about outages on the network, or if, heaven forbid, somebody strikes a pole and we have to go out there and repair it in an emergency situation, we're able to do it in a timely manner. So with that, that's kind of wraps up my presentation. Wanted to make sure that we kind of covered some of the current concerns that we've heard over the past couple of weeks. Wanted to provide a little bit more transparency with the map and the poles and the locations and the numbers and the types. So I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
I do have some questions.
Sure.
You came and saw me in my office in early February, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have extra copies of the map tonight?
I do not have them tonight.
Okay, well, I don't have it.
Okay.
So we get an agenda on Friday with a pack. You guys didn't know that?
I did not know that that's when you get your agenda.
All right. So you...
And I'm happy to follow up with the map in an email right after this meeting.
That'd be great. And I think you have probably, what, 45 citizens who have emailed you down in Texas or wherever it is. You got all those email addresses. You and I talked about that when you came to my office, didn't we,
And we have
sir?
responded to residents.
Okay. And so my suggestion would be, if you can get back to your office and maybe get your two really, really good, very expensive lobbyists from downtown Lansing to get on their computers tonight, maybe you could email that map to everybody in the audience. You have the email address, plus all of us. Because
Yeah.
I'd like to see the map.
Yeah, we're happy to
Okay?
provide it.
Can you do that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And do you have authority to speak on behalf of Crown Castle tonight?
I do have the authority to speak on
Okay.
behalf of Crown Castle.
So you're acknowledging that, in fact, you have not made any applications yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I seem to remember when you were talking to me in my office with the other three people, and you correct me if I'm wrong, okay? Because I could be wrong. I thought that there was an agreement between you and your engineering woman and the lobbyist that there had been a kind of a screw-up in terms of publishing those notices.
It wasn't
back in
necessarily
December.
a screw-up. I would call it more of an oversight.
Okay, well, then I heard something different.
Okay.
But I'm just curious, because this morning's paper has two more notices. And one of them is for a pole at 592 Gunson Street, and the other one is for a pole at 212 Highland Avenue. Did you know those are going to be in the paper today?
I mean, I probably have it in an email today. I have the team reach out to the city directly when those notifications are going in. I don't post the notifications, our regulatory
Well,
team
I understand
does.
that, sir.
Yeah.
You're part of a big bureaucracy, but has somebody been communicating with our city staff?
Yes.
Before those notices go out?
Yes.
Okay. And I think you already acknowledged on behalf of the corporation that your plan, and I think you said this when you were in my office, your plan is to, once you locate these things, it's going to be to sell to other carriers too, is that correct?
The goal is to market it to other carriers, so we're kind of reducing the amount of infrastructure in the right-of-way.
Well, you want to sell to the other carriers, correct?
We will market it to the other carriers.
Yeah, okay. And so if we look at this map, which we don't have in front of us, I understand you put it up there, but I can't see that far. And I just want to confirm for the record tonight, you're saying you're going to have 54 locations.
Correct.
That's the plan.
Yes.
And 28 of them are going to be co-located.
Yes.
And those are depicted on this map, which you and your lobbyists are going to get out overnight tonight, correct?
We will send it out when I get back to...
Okay. And I think you said of the 28, I'm sorry, of the, quote, new, end quote, poles, 14 of those are going to be wood? Or did I misunderstand that, or is that the 28 co-located ones?
The new poles, it is 16 are metal and 9 are wood.
Okay, what did I get? What was 14 and 15? Was that the
Yeah, that was the co-location ones, 15 and
okay,
14.
and give me the one you just gave me then?
That would be 16 and 9, 16 metal, 9 wood.
Of the new ones?
Of the new ones.
And
So-
are those, I think you said this, but are those varieties depicted on this map?
Yes, they are color-coded on the map of what's a wood pole, what's new, what's a metal pole was new, what's a co-location pole,
And-
which is
and
metal.
I think we talked about this a little bit in my office, but tell me why they can't all be wood poles?
Well, the goal is to make them blend in with existing infrastructure. So if you're on a street that there's all metal poles, a wood pole would not necessarily fit in with that streetscape. and vice versa. Like if we were on a street where there was all wood poles, a metal pole would kind of stick out.
So in your operation, who is it that decides? Is that engineers?
Yeah, that would be our network design and construction team.
Okay. They're not like landscape architects or anything like
No,
that?
they're engineers
Okay,
and construction
then
guys.
I think the last thing, you do have poles in Ann Arbor, correct?
I would have to confirm that, but we do have them in Detroit.
Yeah, I'm talking about Ann Arbor right now.
Yeah, I
Different
cannot
town.
confirm that. You're
Yeah,
kind
okay.
of put me on the spot. I
Well-
don't have that information available to
Okay.
me.
So I thought you were here on behalf of the corporation, so do you know anything about these guidelines in Ann Arbor for placement of these poles?
I have not read the Ann Arbor guidelines.
Okay. Well, can you maybe by, say, Friday of this week, because we have another council meeting next week, and we may want to discuss this some more, but can you by Friday of this week have somebody in your operation indicate to our city manager by email if you in fact have locations in Ann Arbor, number one, and number two, if you abide by the small cell wireless facilities design guidelines in Ann Arbor? You're writing it down, so I assume you've never seen it before.
I have not read it.
Okay. And then I seem to remember when you and I were talking in my office that I asked you some questions about other university towns where you had
Correct.
placed facilities, and the only one I remember where you had actually placed and they were in place was Madison, Wisconsin. Is that correct?
We have some venue sites. The venue team does the campus stuff where this is our right-of-way team because we're working in the right-of-way versus a university that would be a venue. But we do work with Purdue University, Wisconsin. Those are the first two that come to mind off the top of my head.
You misunderstand my question. I assume, are you saying that you place poles on the Purdue University campus?
We do have infrastructure on the campus, yes.
Okay, well, that's Indiana. So I think you mentioned when we were talking in my office, you were talking about Mount Pleasant?
We have applications into the city of Mount Pleasant right now, yes.
Okay. And I assume, just like here, the reason you're applying there is so you can get coverage over the university, correct?
The coverage, small cells, because the way that they operate, they do not cover the geography that a tower does. So realistically, where we're proposing the small cells, it's to cover those neighborhoods. Where those neighborhoods are, they wouldn't have the range to reach the whole way over to campus.
All right.
So
you can't cover Michigan State University with these locations?
no, we cannot.
Okay. And so in Madison, or excuse me, Mount Pleasant, I assume you're not putting poles on campus in Mount Pleasant. So you're talking about the periphery of the town, to your knowledge?
It'd be whatever neighborhood that the team is trying to cover for network coverage and capacity.
Could you please, as a courtesy to us and our constituents, check and see if you've actually produced a map yet for Mount Pleasant? And also get that to our city manager, please? Can you do that?
I can talk to the network design and construction team to see if they can provide that information. I cannot. I'm not going to make a promise that I'm going to send another city's deployment without their consent.
Without whose consent?
My team's consent.
Oh. Well, all I'm asking for, sir, is if you've submitted one to a city.
Yeah, it's probably part of the public record.
That's a public
Yeah.
record, right?
Yes.
We can agree on that.
Yes.
So, I'm not telling you to, disclose any, trade secret. I'm just saying if you've got one from Mount Pleasant, could you please get it to us?
Again, I will check with my team when I get
Thank
back
you.
into
I
my office.
Appreciate your time tonight.
Yes.
Questions?
I see that there's a map on your website, and it shows that there's towers just in Saginaw and Flint, and then it shows our plan, and it mentions Lansing, but it doesn't show Lansing's map like it shows East Lansing's map. So my first question is, do you think it's up to date, the map that's on your website? It shows the different dots of the areas that there are poles and cells right now.
The map that I provided to council tonight is the most accurate one. I received it on Sunday morning, and I added it to the presentation for today and sent it over to Nicole immediately. So what is in tonight's presentation is the most accurate map.
Yeah, of East Lansing.
Of East Lansing, correct.
And so what I'm asking is, on your website, or on the website, it shows dots
Yep.
of where you all have already built cell towers or where you plan to.
Correct.
And the dots list Saginaw and Flint as having towers now, and it doesn't mention anyone else besides East Lansing and City of Lansing.
We actually have multiple builds across Michigan right now, Flint being one of them, Saginaw, Mount Pleasant, Lansing, and East Lansing are the ones that immediately come to mind.
Will you get a map of the City of Lansing on the website? So they're so specific with the City of East Lansing, which of course we appreciate, but it would be good to see for our neighboring city what the cell towers look like.
Yes, we can get you a similar type of documentation, photo.
Do you guys ever show before and afters of like whole neighborhoods or aerial views or something like that to really get a picture of what it looks like when these towers are built?
If we're required to provide as-built drawings per, post-inspection requirements, you would see what the plan would look like after it was installed.
But if you're not required?
No.
All right. All right. I don't think that you, I don't think you'll answer this, but I do want to speak to the person's point about 5G and the community's health. Do you have anything you want to say on that or share with us on that? It's kind of against, the business. Probably.
If you go back to the slide deck. It's the very last slide of the deck. It was part of the appendix of the slide deck that we provided. Because I thought maybe the question would come up in tonight's meeting. What you're seeing there is wavelength and radio frequency. There's a green dotted line about 2/3 of the way over to the right on that. And it's kind of the split between ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. Now, I'm not a physicist or a medical professional, but everything to the left of that line is considered to be non-ionizing, where everything to the right is ionizing. And obviously the FCC sets standards for what you're allowed to utilize, power, the spectrum. They've looked at it for years.
And this is just walk me back. How did you guys get here? Like, did someone ask you to come, or did you look at our area and decide to come, or?
Our carrier partners look where there's network holes in coverage and needs for capacity, not necessarily, for now and in the future. So they came to us and contracted us to be able to go build out the network in the neighborhood.
And do you have to, who picks the number of towers? You, us?
We pick the number based on what they're trying to do via the network and try to do it most efficiently. We're not going to try to overbuild small cells because it would just become more expensive for us. So we're trying to do it in the most efficient manner.
Is it Verizon or more than Verizon that
It
calls
is
you guys?
just Verizon at this time, correct?
Yep.
Yep.
The presentation was added to the agenda packet on Sunday or Monday after being received, and so so the map is available, although I still would ask that you adhere to the guidance provided by Councilperson Brookover, but just as an FYI, if there are those that would like to see the map or any of the presentation, it has been added.
Yeah, if an individual would like to see the map, people in the crowd, if they could give me their email tonight, because I know my team, it's 9 o'clock at night, they're not going to be sending out the map this evening, so it would be me doing it.
I had a question about equipment. Some of the responses that we got from the audience were concerned about the types of equipment that would be attached to the towers, and I just wanted to clarify. We had a resident a photograph here today, which looked very different from the equipment that you've got on your towers. So can you just kind of explain the difference between what we see that has already been installed in the community and what you're proposing? And then I guess also with the idea that multiple carriers might be using these towers, are they using the same radio antennas that are already installed on the poles, or would that mean additional equipment installed on the poles for additional carriers?
Okay, let me answer the first question first. So
Sure.
the photo that I saw that was passed around, that's older deployments. It's probably 4G or LTE. And it kind of bleeds into the second part of your question. 5G, the way that it's being deployed now, the antennas are separate from the radios. Or, I'm sorry, 4G, the antennas are separate from the radios. So when you saw those boxes on the side of the pole, that's where they would house the radio to feed the antenna. If you think about it kind of like your car has an antenna on it, it receives a signal, and the radio turns it into sound, right? Kind of works the same way. So in this instance, the radios were down on the pole, and the antenna were up at the top of the pole. The 5G technology, due to that latency, that reflexivity of the network, the radios need to be significantly closer to the antenna. So therefore, they're actually integrated into one piece. It's the radio and the antenna as one piece. To answer the last part of your question, because those radios are integrated, if another carrier came on and wanted to attach their equipment, it would be an additional RAD center just above the existing.
So potentially, and I'm worst case scenarioing this because we do have residents that are concerned, if you had, say, 3 carriers come and want to use the pole, there could be 3 sets of antennas on top of the pole.
Correct.
And would there be an additional permitting process to install the additional equipment, or is the site permitted as it stands?
No, we would be required per building codes to go through the regular permitting process to co-locate on existing infrastructure, because we'd have to prove out the structural capacity of the pole and go through that permitting process.
Okay, I think obviously one of the concerns of the community is the co-location and the disruption and the additional poles in a right-of-way that's already quite crowded with utility infrastructure. But I think another concern from the community that maybe you could kind of plan to address if you have further communication is just a promise of non-further disruption. That's not a very grammatical sentence, but we have citizens that are concerned that maintenance and ongoing installations on these poles will become an inconvenience to them. So
yeah, I think a lesson learned here is how we become a little bit more communicative with the community and council and local representatives. To be able to just be a little bit more transparent, as I talked about the construction schedule, understanding that this is a residential neighborhood, it would be on us to make sure that individuals where we're building near know when we're going to be building near their house. And that at the end of the day, if the team doesn't do a good job of restoration after post-construction, I would encourage anybody to call our network operations center and put a complaint in.
I'll inject here. And there's some concerns from the public if you've got to sit in on the meeting a little bit, obviously. We appreciate and really like dissent and having tough discussions, and some of those people out there like us, and they still come with tough questions. One of the tougher questions is maybe the reputation for different legal actions and things when individuals have disagreement with your organization. Do you guys have some commitments today that as CEL and other groups move forward, you won't be looking for legal intimidation or other tracks like that? That's part of your, I guess, reputation at this point.
Yeah, that concern came out of an article that Nicole was kind enough to share with me from 2016. It was more part of a process. It was because the people spoke at a public meeting about the tower that we were proposing. They were also named whenever there was litigation with the municipality over the siting of the tower. But even if you look into that same article, you'll see that none of the residents were sued, and that's not how we do business. But I think I would speak on behalf of the company where I'd say, as long as we're doing our part responsibly and within the law, and the municipality is doing their part responsibly and within state and federal law, then there would be no reason to ever have to go to litigation.
I I think and the challenging piece here with this kind of dot location, I'm not sure if this makes it better or worse. It's probably worse. I think you're understanding the individual's concerns. I think almost where personal property or individual right-of-ways and all that stuff is not impacted, I think are separate. I think when you put it in this form like this, it's overwhelming. I think each individual person, I know that's a little bit more difficult, but I think that's what you're learning a little bit. Each individual has some different concerns and that kind of thing. So, and I think even in our conversation, maybe the communication got out ahead of the regulatory, got out ahead of this, that, and the other. But I think that's important to acknowledge. And I hate that they put you in the position to come and go, this wasn't botched a little bit, or maybe it isn't. If
No,
this is
no,
the standard
I will
procedure.
absolutely acknowledge that we've actually changed our practices based off of this experience, where our regulatory team, was working independently of our local team, the team that would be filing permits for here and doing work, and there just wasn't, the proper communication on the timing of those notifications, and we were, being able to notify the city that they were coming. So since then, we've fixed that part to say whenever we have notifications that are being filed in a local newspaper, we now contact the city in advance of it saying, hey, there's 2 more sites coming out this week.
Yeah, I think, so was that a verbal commitment on the point of kind of the legal piece? That's a concern. I want the
Yes.
groups, so that's a commitment to allowing them to voice
Yes.
their opinions and push for whatever for any fear of repercussions or recourse from your organization.
We're not in the business of suing residents, so.
Okay.
I want to just make sure I understand the answer to that question. You got a tough job. I understand that. You're not an engineer. You're doing the best you can. And I thought you said you were authorized to speak on behalf of the corporation tonight. So am I to understand that under no circumstances would Crown Castle ever sue a resident of the city of East Lansing for expressing their opinion with regard to Crown Castle's applications for these devices in this city?
We would not.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up, just to make sure I understood one of your comments as well? The 2-week notification that is provided, you said, to the city when there is a site or work that is going to be, or some prep work that is happening, is that notification made to engineering, or is it to the city manager, or are we expected to then notify the residents that would be impacted by that, or is there also a notification to residents or those in the area that comes from you?
I mean, the notification is a public notification posted in a newspaper for that sole purpose of notifying the public. What we're trying to do is notify the city in advance of those notifications in the event they get any questions.
Okay, and is there any personal outreach to the individuals? So I think it's kind of a follow-up to the question the mayor raised about the dots. If there are areas that have been identified, is there any personal outreach that occurs in those areas to talk specifically with those? There was a resident
There is
earlier.
not.
Okay. Thank you.
There is an address for an individual at Crown Castle that can be notified. She's our Vice President of Regulatory Affairs.
Yeah, this is tough. I think, and this is what we tried never to do. This style kind of puts you in natural opposition, and I hate to see that. And I obviously know my inclination is just to be like, well, give us some teeth. And it's like it's nothing you're doing. It's just the way that this rolls out. The natural feeling is we should lawyer up. That's just what this feels like. I'm not coming away with any real. Yeah, but I'm not. I don't mean that in a real way. I'm not coming away feeling solution. I do want us, and I'll state that publicly, I do want us to make sure that we have things in order, like that was mentioned in the earlier portions. This is a utility at this point, so just across the board that we have order to how these things come to us and they're not being dictated to us. I think that's a big frustration.
What I would encourage the city to do is something probably similar to what Ann Arbor has done and adopt small cell design and aesthetic standards. That way you have a little bit more ability to talk about the design of what we're proposing, what other organizations will be proposing in the public right of way.
So you'd be in favor of that?
Yeah.
We always encourage municipalities, especially where there's state law that backs it up, that provides the municipality with the authority to be able to provide design standards.
Thank you.
Now we're partnering.
Yeah.
Okay. That's yes on those. Right. Questions? All right, thank you.
I'll be in the back
Thank you,
taking
sir.
email addresses.
May I ask, will you take the question from the audience?
No, we're not doing that now.
If he's willing to talk with you outside of the meeting, I think that's fine.
I will speak with.
Can we have a representative from the group to speak? That'd be more fair than a barrage of individuals if you have a, sure. Okay.
I guess I should stress that we're only trying to arrive at a solution that implements 5G service to the community of East Lansing in the most gentle way to our cityscape. That's what we're concerned about. And the one question that hasn't been raised by any of the council members, but that I think is germane to what's happening here, is if you would put up that map again of the tower locations. And while she's doing that, I'll simply say in anticipation of that the towers are located in an L configuration that is closely bordered on two sides, the most heavily developed part of the Michigan State campus. Now, I know from looking at your application last year that you installed fiber optic cable throughout Michigan State's campus, along with the fiber optic cable that serves these locations that are depicted on this map. I also know that MSU provides 5G service to its entire campus at a cost to the providers who work with MSU. And I also am not so unschooled in how these things work that it isn't obvious to me that what is going to happen here is that Verizon is going to be able to provide, because these reach 1,000 feet, I believe, service well into Michigan State's campus, and they're going to be doing it at the rate of $100 pole for a new pole and $25 a pole per year on a co-located pole, which is much less than MSU is charging for the provider that it's working with on campus. And I believe it is also true that you have admitted in communications to council members, you, I think, with the group you were with who spoke to at least one of the council members, acknowledged that Verizon intends to use these poles that are installed at a very low cost on City of East Lansing right-of-way to provide service to the campus rather than working with Michigan State. And so you're using, tell me if I'm wrong, you're using City of East Lansing right-of-way not merely to serve, I mean, the City of East Lansing extends quite a way north and quite a way west and quite a way east and quite a way south from where you're putting these poles. They're being installed for one primary purpose in that density and in that configuration, and that is to provide or to compete with MSU service that MSU is charging other providers to provide using its fiber optic network, and you're using public right-of-way to serve MSU, not the community of East Lansing. Isn't that correct? That's my question.
I would disagree with that statement. Verizon is trying to provide network near those poles. So it's going to be the area adjacent to that location. Again, due to the range and the power of these poles, it would not reach that far and penetrate into Michigan State's campus. So the intent of the small cell build here is to service the areas near those locations.
Why is it not throughout the city of East Lansing?
That would be a question for Verizon.
All right. One more spokesperson, please.
First, I want to thank you for being here tonight, but I know it's a difficult situation, but I just want to point out 3 startling disconnects between what we were just told and the facts that are happening here and how they've unfolded. First, we're told that the need for these towers is in those places where there's a high density of users and a high density of devices. And yet the very first place they put in the newspaper ad is in the heart of the Glencairn neighborhood, where there are no multi-family dwellings, only single-family dwellings. We're not allowed to rent out our dwellings or to rent out Airbnb. I would challenge you to find anywhere in the city of East Lansing where there would be a lower density of users than where they propose to put this first tower. And I can tell you, my neighbors and I, none of us are complaining about our cell service. The second disconnect is what we're told about co-localization. Well, again, our address was the first one pinpointed, and there are 2 existing wooden poles adjacent to the 2 corners of my property that are already at least 30 or 40. Why aren't they co-localizing there? We haven't been told, but my guess is because they would have to share revenue if they did that. And if co-localization is so important, we were shown a sign of a tower that has a street lamp on it. Well, at our address, there is an existing street lamp. There was no proposal that they, modify a street lamp. It is a new tower. So I don't understand that. And the third disconnect is they're told that they want to work with the community, and I didn't hear anything in his presentation that he's going to work with members of CEL who have already been in contact with him and have tried to engage with Crown Castle and have tried to engage with them, and mostly what we've heard is crickets. And they don't need us to give them our email addresses. We've been emailing them like mad for quite some time. And I sent a list of questions early in January, and I've yet to hear answers to the 6 or 7 specific questions I had. So I will just say that if they want their communication to be better, they have some work to do. And I do hope that they can tell us tonight that they are willing to meet with CEL and meet with this group of citizens to help us solve this problem, take care of their needs, and take care of our neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you.
So to meet with your organization, respond with your organization, we can address your 2 items that you wanted council to do, which one was provide a map, which we have, and provide, what additional information that you would have. I can look into all the questions. I'm not the one responding to all those questions that come into that mailbox. So I would have to go back and take a look and see whenever the questions came in. But I will ensure that your question is answered. Did I miss anything else there?
Only how many of these towers would be required if you were not also serving MSU's campus without putting any on MSU's campus? It is not public right of way.
I'm not an RF engineer. I cannot answer that question.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Mayor, can I suggest something before we leave this topic?
Yeah.
I'd suggest that the council, subject to the advice of the city attorney, appoint an ad hoc committee to to study this issue specifically with attention to the guidelines from Ann Arbor as to, again, subject to the city attorney's opinion, as to whether we can utilize similar guidelines to guide us through this. And I would suggest that we have a member from the Planning Commission, we have a member from the Historic District Commission, and we have Mr. Brian Loomis, who I think is a representative of Cell, who lives in my neighborhood, and I think has some background in this stuff. So that's just a suggestion in terms of moving forward, so we have some way of sort of rationalizing this discussion as we go forward.
Thank you.
First of all, I greatly appreciate the assistance of the members of CEL. I did get to speak with Mr. Baker at length today, and I think it was very worthwhile, and certainly the information they've provided is certainly helpful. We talked with the mayor a lot. We take this seriously, and we certainly want to look at the guidelines as provided by Ann Arbor or any other thing that we can do. And so we'll certainly be following up, and I think that Councilman Brookover's suggestion certainly makes sense. What we need to do at this point, I believe, because as you've referenced, there's an automatic approval process that's set forth within the legislation, and that's 60 days from when we get the application. We can extend it for another 15 days. A little bit of detail in there, but that's kind of the basics. And so, so we do need to make sure that my concern right now is just that they know where they want to put poles, they know they want them to be metal or wood, and so the sooner we can get information prior to the finalized application so that we can look at the locations and look at proposing alternatives, I think is really going to be the most helpful at this stage. Did you want to say something on that issue?
You're asking us to submit the plans in advance of submitting the plans?
No, solely just the locations that you already referenced on the map. If we can just have the addresses so that we can start looking. There is, as Mr. Baker had referenced, there is the 75-foot circle where we can propose alternatives, but the residents need to understand the way that this state law is written, unfortunately, gives us that option and then takes it away. And so when we look at that, I really want to make sure everyone understands. It notes that an authority, meaning the city, when it receives an application to place a new utility pole, may propose an alternative location within the right-of-way or on property or structures owned or controlled by an authority within 75 feet of the proposed location. The applicant shall use that alternative location, sounds like they're giving it to us, if, as determined by the applicant has the right to do so on reasonable terms and conditions, as determined by the applicant that the alternative location does not impose unreasonable technical limits, and as determined by that applicant, it doesn't impose significant additional costs. And so the applicant gets to determine what's significant and what's reasonable and what's unreasonable. And so when we look at this, we need to have as much time as possible to propose alternative locations, and these aesthetic requirements that are proposed by Ann Arbor are subject to very similar standards within the law. And so I definitely agree with Sel that we need to look at openness and communication and hopefully cooperation, because lawyering up is not going to be the best solution in this circumstance given the state of that law.
Figuratively.
Yeah. And so I think that's all I really had to say at this point, but I really appreciate everyone's input on this.
And are you okay if assuming the council agrees with some sort of an ad hoc committee, are you okay with us, I guess we're going to need your advice, or that ad hoc committee is going to need your advice about, for want of better terminology, the adoption of these kinds of standards like Ann Arbor has? I really hate it just pains me to defer to Ann Arbor. So, but in any event, I just quick comment from you tonight. You don't think there's a problem with us going ahead and adopting these while this process is going through?
Adopting the ad hoc committee?
No, some standards.
No, I mean, the reality is if we're doing it by ordinance, the sooner the better.
Yeah,
They need
okay.
to be in place
Okay.
when applications are received.
And just for clarification, it's 60 days for a co-location on an existing pole, 90 days for a new pole.
Yes, thank you.
For new poll, did you say?
It's 90 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yep, can we get 10 minutes for a break? Welcome back. Next up, item 5.2, City Council Involvement and Staff Search Process.
Good evening. I'm Emily Kenny, HR Administrator for the City of East Lansing. And I'll be going over the hiring process for the director level, including the involvement of City Council in the process. Oh, went a little too far. So the initial screening in the process is done when we receive applications. They come directly to the HR office, and then they're forwarded to the hiring manager, which for the directors, that would be the city manager. They are then reviewed by the city manager, and he would determine who he is interested in bringing for first round interviews, and he would inform HR of those candidates. HR then reaches out to schedule the first round. First interviews are a panel interview, and it's made up of the hiring manager, so for directors, that's the city manager, a member of HR, and any other directors or staff that the hiring manager thinks may be important to involve in that first step. Usually we keep those to about 4 people on the panel, though, for the first interview, give or take. And then the real goal of that first interview is to determine if the candidates have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform the essential functions of that position. Candidates remaining in the selection process after first interviews are scheduled for a second round of interviews. In the second round, the candidates meet with multiple different groups. City Council is one group that participates in that second round, with 2 members being scheduled to spend time meeting with the candidates. Other groups may consist of city staff, members of boards or commissions, community members, and really any other individuals that we think may have insight into the position. The feedback from all the groups is compiled and sent to the hiring manager for consideration. And the goal of the second interview is to assess if the candidate is a fit for the role and for the organization. There is an exception to when this process takes place, and that has to do with interim appointments and general appointments, sometimes when there's a succession plan already in place. So when a director leaves the city, an appointment can be made for an interim director. The appointment of interim director is made by the city manager, and sometimes those appointments are because we need somebody to serve in that function, but they're not necessarily interested in serving in that function permanently. Sometimes they are interested in serving in the director position, and if that's the case, this time can be treated as an evaluation period. If that evaluation period is successful, the interim director may be appointed to the director position by the city manager. So that would be done in lieu of a public posting and collecting applications from candidates outside of the city organization. The final decision, whether it be through that appointment process or through the interview process, is made by the hiring manager, and a conditional offer is then made by Human Resources. Once the conditional offer is accepted by the candidate, HR then conducts background and reference checks. And once those background and reference checks are satisfactorily completed, a start date is scheduled and an official offer is presented to the candidate. That's all I have for you, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Before we open for questions, can I expand just a little bit on the presentation? On the first slide, where it talked about the initial interview, it just occurred to me while we were doing this, there are also exceptions where we have used an outside firm to assist with the recruitment. Then they would also do some of the evaluating as to whether or not they meet the minimum requirements or the requirements to move forward in some of the background checks. Then I think on the final piece, I would say where you have, well, there's 2 things. On the where you use an interim in lieu and sometimes they're appointed, we were discussing earlier, and I'm not sure we're prepared to say that this is an absolute, but there certainly could be consideration given where there are larger departments and thinking about what is typically referred to as big three in terms of eating up a lot of your budget, like police, fire, and DPW, where there may be a requirement to have a council and a public involvement, even where you have interim. That certainly could be something that would be perhaps appropriate, especially at that level, or with them having so much of an impact to the budget and also facing outward to the public as much as they do. And then the last thing I would say before Emily concludes is that there's also, where there is involvement of second interviews and secondary interviews, there, whether it's with staff or council, those are typically advisory in terms of their function. And that is sometimes because all of the information, so in some of the secondary interviews, you may not be assessing technical proficiency. So there may be some things that you learn in the primary interview, or you're looking at some of the information in the resumes and vitaes that may be perhaps more important even than some of the things that you might learn in secondary interviews. So we certainly, I think anyone that is sensible would consider the advice very seriously and take that under consideration. But I think that the final hiring is subject to the city manager, and that might be because of some of the information that is attained in other interview processes as well.
Any questions?
Where did this come from?
It's been the process as long as I've been here, so I'm not sure exactly when it was started, but that's been the process.
Well, I mean, is it written down anyplace?
No, it's not. It's not a written policy anywhere. I think at times each situation is unique in a way, so to tie us into a specific way of doing things, which might not always be the best way to do it in every situation, it might not be advised to make it a written policy necessarily.
Okay, well, Mayor, I'm the one that sort of got this discussion going, and I'm passing something down right now. I mean, I don't think we need to take a lot of time tonight on this, but, and I think as I said to you yesterday when we talked, the agenda item isn't exactly what I meant. I really wanted to sort of talk about, and you and I had this discussion. I mean, I think part of the issue right now with the public is they don't really know what's going on. And it seems to me we need some transparency. I believe that there's been some dissatisfaction in the past from the council in terms of how some of these things worked or didn't work, and probably from the public too. So, I apologize for only giving it to you tonight, but this afternoon I spent some time sort of thinking about through this, and so I'm just going to read it for the purposes of discussion and see what y'all think about it. But so this is a proposal for going forward on personnel vacancies. And my suggestion is that, number one, we receive a written report from the interim city manager and the interim city clerk by March 18th. That'd be this Friday, 2023, regarding the following. And the reason I'm picking that date is so we can keep the train moving here and maybe pick up the discussion next Tuesday, our meeting next Tuesday. And I don't think this report's a big deal because I think it's just a compilation of things that may or may not be out there. So 1A would be a current organizational chart showing all non-union vacancies. And all of this would be subject to the city attorney's input in terms of what should be confidential or not confidential, although I think most of this is probably a city record. B, a copy of each job listing. C, copies of all, quote, blue sheets, end quote, for such positions, subject to the city attorney's advice. My understanding in the past is that when a non-union, for want of better terminology, supervisory person suggests that there needs to be a hiring or a pay increase or whatever, that somehow through the system a blue sheet is promulgated. Is that correct, ma'am?
Somewhat. Blue sheets are used for when somebody is hired and for pay changes, but if it's an indication that a position needs to be filled, it's a personnel requisition form that's used.
Okay, so that's not a blue sheet?
Right. The blue sheet would come once you know who you were hiring.
Okay, so I think then I would substitute personnel requisition slip for there. Would that be the right terminology, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, and then D, a current job description for each open job. E, applicable current hiring policies and charter provisions. That's obviously in conjunction with the city attorney. I think they're both charter provisions, but I think there are also some hiring policies sprinkled throughout different city promulgations. F, every action and/or contact, written and oral, taken through March 18th, 2023 to fill any such vacancy. And G, any job interviews currently scheduled. So that would be the first written report by Friday. And B, also by Friday, a complete written copy of any current city personnel manual. I didn't go onto the city website, but I'm aware historically that there's always been a personnel manual or employee manual or whatever, which I think is applicable to at least non-union employees. And then 3, I guess what I'm thinking is that we put a discussion item on for next Tuesday, incorporating such documents in a process for going forward. So all I'm trying to suggest here is we somehow develop a plan fairly expeditiously in terms of how we want to proceed, give some help maybe to the interim city manager in terms of, our involvement or not our involvement in this process. And one of the reasons I'm suggesting all of these vacancies is, in a certain time and place, maybe it made sense to only have the city council, and I'll just say historically, my understanding is under prior administrations, it was fairly common for at least 2 city council members to be involved in what I'll call final interviews. And I think I said that last week. So there's some historical precedent to that. But anyway, I just think it makes sense to put together a plan. So A, we have a plan. B, the interim city manager has a plan. And C, the public knows what the plan is. Because maybe if we put together a plan and stick to it, the rumor mill will stop. Our employees will understand what the system is, the rationality of the system, how it's going to operate, and hopefully that'll give them some confidence going forward so we don't have continuing people leaving for whatever reasons they're leaving. So those are my thoughts, and I just throw that out there for discussion. And
yeah, I'll say definitely in support of the systems approach. I think as well, 2 other things as a city, the ability to bring on some more extra muscle whenever we need it, and it needs to be triggered immediately if we're having a lot of displacements or a lot of those things, especially in the HR department or recruiting. But that's just kind of that's nothing we discuss or talk about. We trigger that, as well as how we communicate to the public, that there's automatic kind of forward communications, because I kind of know what will happen as we rebuild and kind of bring things back on, and things will stabilize, and that'll be kind of a whimper or a whisper, kind of that things are on track or whatever, and then all the offloading or things that are going on or negative in that sense tend to be really loud. So I just want to make sure that we equally communicate, in fairness, when people are coming on board, and that it's a big deal, and those kind of things, as well as that as you need more recruiting muscle, or that we are doing certain things. And I've always wanted reconsideration around, even as far as the interim tag goes. I think that creates its own set of problems without a path to the role, or even people in long-term interim roles, not dissuading anyone who's stepped in and done those things in an interim way for us, but long-term, I just that creates some conflict, and I think that's the stuff we got to look at here, is where natural conflict's being created inside of the organization, and not put people in conflict and with these different roles and things like that, and really think about it structurally, because we have a chance to right now. So yeah, the answer is yes, and kind of moving forward with that, and definitely making sure from an HR perspective you have the muscle necessary to kind of rebuild and support that. And I would support that, and hope the city manager would as well, to get you supported and built up so we can kind of move this process forward, because I think it'll move quickly once you have the proper level of support. So,
Mayor, if I could, and I just want to make sure I also understand clearly, because one of the things that I want to make sure I understand and that I also want to be clear on is that when we put the presentation together, you asked where did it come from. It did come from your question last week. And my questions to HR was what has been the typical process and can we put that in writing and reflect that? I think it's important to note that there has been nothing done or changed with any of the hiring practices. I have not come in and proposed changing or doing anything other than what has been past practice. And we have been moving along in the hiring process consistent with what has been past practice with regard to, in fact, I'm kind of midstream in some of the processes where they use the recruitment team. And so I've just inserted myself only to the extent that we've continued what has been past practice. We certainly, based on your question last week, thought we should try to put in writing what happens typically, and that has been the process to involve City Council at different times. I even going back as far as when I was hired 20 plus years ago, that was there was a point at which we involved and had to meet with a couple of council members, community members, and others. And so I understand what to have a written, perhaps, process would be beneficial. I think there are times when it could be different, especially when you have clear succession planning or some other things. I think also that one of the things that I talked with our city attorney about, and that I would really like to see that I think addresses some of the things that are outlined here, would be to at some point have a personnel committee that's a standing committee, subcommittee of City Council where you would have at least 2 members on, where you could discuss any major personnel moves or transactions that have happened and occurred, so that that could be presented as we have time to do that. So I think some of the things, for example, the job posting or the job descriptions, all of that would be necessary to post for the job positions anyway. So it occurs, we can make it happen in some other fashion, but I think much of that already does occur. The current org chart, I'm not sure that it shows all non-union positions on there. That perhaps could be created, but that would be something that's a new document that we'd have to create to show all of the positions and then all of the vacancies. I think if we had a standing personnel committee, that would be a part of that regular report, that we have 6 vacancies in the city this week. They are in the following positions, that we have a recruitment or a posting that has gone out and we received 12 applicants. And you could have that kind of information on a regular basis. I do have a little concern with trying to get this done now, only because we are down to Emily for the most part, and that we have a lot of we're trying to actually get the jobs filled at the moment, but we certainly can do that if that's what's requested. But your concerns are not, they haven't fallen on deaf ears, and some of the things were already on the radars in terms of a way how we can improve the process. I do think, and I used an analogy my time on the school board when I talked with Tony about it, was we had a personnel committee. There would be times you might have a dispute between a principal and assistant principal. Staff's divided, parents are divided, and you need to have some action, whether that is to transfer someone or something else. And we did not want to be blindsided by that when we got into a school board meeting where everyone knew about what happened except for the school board members. So I think having some mechanism to have those kind of conversations, not that they wouldn't be transparent, you still would have to bring them forward publicly, but at least you would have a standing committee to give the detail that's permitted within the law, and that's where I was trying to find out with Tony what would be permitted, what wouldn't, and those things. But I think that is also perhaps an alternative to this approach that would help to get to some of the concerns expressed.
Well, this has nothing to do, this is no commentary on anything you've done so far. My concern is, I think we need to define the hiring equation. And I believe there may be documents that do that. Number two, I think you may be making an assumption that this city council has been delighted with some of the past practices in terms of the function of hiring and firing, and I don't think that's true. And so all I'm trying to do is define the current structure. And I believe all these things are readily available. A part of them, I think, are probably in the clerk's purview, but it seems to me like the two of you can probably figure that out. And talking about personnel committee or something like that, that's a new deal. I'm not looking for something new. I just wanted to find what it is right now. What is it? And how is it supposed to be working? And then let's figure out together how to make it work. So if that allays some of your concerns, so be it.
I think, candidly, it's not that that I don't hear you or think that these things would be beneficial. They haven't existed for the past 11 years, and I'm being asked to produce them in a week.
You say they haven't existed?
That is my understanding. You're asking for something now that hasn't been asked for in the last 11 years, and now I'm being asked to produce that in a matter of a week.
I think the whole point here is I think these already exist, but I guess we'll find out the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have some questions about your
Sure.
request. So for all non-union vacancies, is that a reference to all managerial positions?
Yes, it should be.
Okay, and so the org chart that I have, I don't know if is Nicole, the org chart that I have, is that it, or there's more to add to that org chart? And this is Nicole, yeah.
Hi, Nicole Mosteller, Assistant to the City Manager. So the organization chart that I provided to Dana, that has some images of some of our managerial staff. It doesn't have all of our non-union managerial staff. We do keep an organization chart on our website that has a few more positions listed. Our communications team runs that, so I'd be happy to provide that to you guys. So that is readily available.
Okay.
I think maybe some of the things Randy might be referring to would be some of our job descriptions, because some of these positions have been filled for 5 to 10 years, and we haven't been reviewing these job descriptions in 5, 10 plus years. So those aren't readily available. Those are in the works. Happy to answer any other questions.
One of the reasons I'm asking for that is I'm the liaison of the Seniors Commission, and I just saw the job description for that position, which is now going to have to be filled, and it's a job description from 1998. I'm not being critical of the fact we haven't revised them. I just want to see what the job description is for the person, or for the position right now. So I assume someplace in the city, somebody found the 1998 one for this. I assume you can find the ones for these other positions, correct?
Yeah, I'd have to defer to Emily from HR, but hopefully we do have some of those on record.
I'm not looking for new ones. I don't want anything new. I just want to see what the job description is.
We do not have a really great central, here's all of our job descriptions, even if they are old. I don't know what happened in the past before everything was in the filing systems they are now. and why some of those were perhaps missed, so that there are times where we are not able to find a job description. So it's a problem. We need to have job descriptions, but creating job descriptions that don't exist, it does take quite a bit of effort, and you have to.
All right, so the job descriptions are not even in the personnel file of the person that was hired for the job?
In many cases, that is the case, yes. Yes. But we have a much more robust selection of job postings, because that's what goes out. Those are the shorter versions that just briefly talk about the position. That's what you post when you're hiring. We have more of those. We don't have job descriptions for all the jobs in the city.
Okay, well, that answers the question. I guess all I'm trying to figure out is what do we have and what do we don't have? That's all. I don't want us to create something new. I'm not asking you guys to create anything new at all, Mr. City Manager. Just let's inventory what we have, that's all.
Well, and I guess that's where I misunderstood, because it says that you would like a job description for all non-union positions, which I think should exist and we should be able to create at some point in time. But just as you pointed out with the senior commission, that position has been filled for some time, so that was probably the last time that job description was reviewed. However, as the openings occur, it triggers an automatic review that we need to make sure it's current, and that's still happening. But again, as to your request, we certainly can do that for current vacancies, and we can give you the old job descriptions if they exist, but they don't all exist.
I'm just asking for what's in existence, that's all.
So I'm interested in going through A through G, and if you all don't mind, if I can get through them to kind of ask my questions or get my clarifications. Is it hard? So Mayor, you mentioned about communicating to the public, and you mentioned about hirings. Were you also referencing communicating to the public about people leaving?
Well, all of it. I think it's all.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I am finding out through Eli. So, no one's telling me either. And
But
I don't know.
I think I didn't mean to interrupt, but just to defer to, I'm definitely going to respect the privacy of the individual. I mean, as far as someone's leaving and then posting, I think there's two different things going on there. So I'm gonna put a pin in that.
Yeah. So thank you for clarifying. I just wanted to see if you were talking about people leaving as well. East Lansing School District has a cool system. They notified us really quickly when the principal was leaving in the high school, and the students were notified really quickly. And I think maybe something to learn from that is that it gets ahead of the person and people who are passing information, unless that's just what we want. If we're comfortable with this type of information being the news, letting the public know, then that's fine. But if there's something different we'd like to do, it's just something to think about. So, my next question for B, a copy of each job listing.
Can I, as you go through, can I respond just to perhaps help, so I wouldn't have to respond at the end on each? So as you go through A, or I can explain that there has been a number of times where the media has had the information almost as quickly as I have and posted that. And it's not for lack of trying to communicate it. It is, in fact, that a resignation might be received and given a date that's a month out. And before I can have an opportunity to even talk with that staff person about whether they would reconsider or whether they would like for us to announce that, whether they would like to give notice to, talk to staff, it's already gone to a media source and been broadcast. I'm saying within 15 minutes in some cases. So I apologize for not getting that out more quickly, but sometimes that's exactly how it's happening.
I mean, I was just looking for clarification on if we're trying to communicate about hirings or, people leaving, because just again, we're getting beat to the information. So, and the school district is an example of when someone left, that communication maybe came through quicker. And it's just something for us to think about. Like, I do want to focus on getting positions filled and supporting people that are here in the city of East Lansing. And so my next question is the copy of each job listing. Is that job postings? Copy of each job posting?
Either or.
And that would, and our job postings happen on our website. And does it happen any other way?
When we post to the website, it automatically posts it to the major job boards like Indeed and things like that. We also post any of the managerial type position, like administrators and directors, to the MML. And we always ask the departments if there's any specialty groups that members may be interested in, that, you know, have a membership for that specific type of occupation. And then we post to those too, if there are associations like that.
Thank you. And so, George, Councilmember Brookover, a copy of the job posting, which might be a link to the City of East Lansing,
I
is
want
that
it in writing. I want to
Okay.
see what the current job postings or listings are in
Okay.
writing,
all right?
please. I understand it might be on some website. I want
Okay.
to see what it is without having to go to a website.
All right. And are we still on the copies of all blue sheets, or did we change?
We change that terminology to
Personnel requisitions.
Okay. And F seems like a lot for them to do by close of business on the 18th. And that's every action and or contact, written or oral, taken through March 18th to fill any such vacancy. It seems like a lot to ask.
really? I don't think so.
And maybe I'm just thinking about it from a FOIA standpoint of
making-
all
this
these,
isn't a
this
FOIA
type of
request.
back and forth.
I assume
Okay.
I assume that we've been executing some kind of a plan, of which I think, I may be wrong, all of these things are part. And just like Emily just said, when they do these postings, they also post it other places. I don't know if that's self-evident from the posting that you're going to hopefully give us. And so, you know, I mean, if we're making phone calls to people, if we're taking any other action, I'd like to know about it.
Would it be fair to say, like, a summary of what's happened, where it's at in the process? Or does it mean that you'd like to see, you know, on Thursday, I emailed 3 candidates, and like, exactly what scope are you looking at it? 'Cause
If Marie Wicks has been making phone calls to fill positions in her office, I want to know who, where, when, and why.
I do have a concern over privacy of the candidates. You don't want to know who we've called, right?
Why would I not want to know that? Isn't that a public record?
Well, it could potentially be, but a lot of people are not comfortable with their current employers knowing that they're interviewing for other positions elsewhere. And so it's just out of, you know, we usually ask them before we contact current employers and things like that. So,
I think you're saying professional courtesy.
yeah, it's a professional courtesy, exactly.
You could maybe not been in those, you could, you know, get someone retaliated against or fired when,
Yeah.
as they're trying to look around or do other things. You know, not in this organization, but there are organizations that do take that tact at times with individuals.
When it comes to the director level, at some point, you know, when people are in that second round interview, it usually does become, you know, public knowledge in the news. But I'm thinking of the administrator level positions and things like that. I just have concern that some candidates might not be comfortable with that and might not want to apply if they know that that's the case.
Well, let me suggest this, okay? I think the taxpayers have a right to know exactly how the bureaucracy is working to fill spots, but I understand, I think, what you're saying. And so I guess you could tell us that so-and-so made a phone call to potential candidate X or potential candidate Y or whatever. I just want to know how we're doing this, that's all. No offense to anybody. I just want to have an idea of how it's working so that we all have a common understanding going forward us, the city manager, the employees, the public. This is how we're going to try to do this stuff.
And forgive me, I'm not trying to be defensive, or I take offense if I come through that way. That's not what I intend. I think trying to clarify what the request is specifically, because for example, with the actions or contacts that are made beyond the job postings, to my knowledge, that the initial contacts and actions are only the submission of the applications and contacts to HR. There's been no direction from me as city manager to any department head or any other manager to solicit or find or make a direct contact to anyone about any job vacancy. And so I'm trying to get at what it is that we need to provide, because beyond really the job posting and we could talk about, of course, where the postings occur and the locations and those things, but I'm not certain.
I'll settle it. I think this is nice. I think there's a limited amount of bandwidth right now. We got to honor that bandwidth. If anything, we need to get you more bandwidth as a priority. This is nice. This can be something moving forward. The priorities are the priorities of making sure your department's strong, staffed, able to staff, and beyond that has the support to do those things. And then these things are nice to add on once you're at full strength. I think I completely want to communicate with the public, but more urgently want to make sure we're not creating additional burnout and doing these things that are cyclical and obviously pile on top of themselves. So we kind of, more importantly than just communicating, we want to stop the pressure of the job falling and falling and falling. That is supported by proper staffing levels and doing and looking at those things. I think this is a nice priority. I think there's bigger priorities, as you say, bigger fish to fry. And if you're going to put your energy towards something, I like the stuff you're doing with interview processes, making sure we're getting broad cross sections of candidates, looking in the right places, doing all those things and making sure that, and this gets to be something we work towards. I don't think it's a next week priority, frankly. I think the priority is getting people support that they need as quickly as possible and then building out from there. So, but I could support all these things long term.
Well, with all due respect, Mayor, I wasn't directing this at the human resources people. The reason I put in here the interim city manager and interim city clerk were going to be responsible for this was so we weren't burdening the human resources department, which is depleted right now anyway. And I have just assumed that this stuff is in existence, but I take your comments to mean that you don't want to pursue this at this point in time. So
I do. I just don't want. I'm trying to be practical here, and just it will fall back on the individual and the request. And I don't think the city manager and the city clerk are both doing judicious other things that are time bound. I want to make sure that people are sticking their time bound. We're also stuck in budget season, so whatever. I just feel like there's a lot of priorities ahead. This is nice. This is a nice to have. And I think it'll be great. And I think we do beyond that. The job description piece and all this being really public facing, I think this is a really valid project. I think this is a challenge that we have and even heard it in process, making sure that people know that our processes are fair and are real. Will get us better candidates and better engagement with the things as well. So I'm here for you, and that we communicate better with the public, and I'm here for that as well. But the priority day, tomorrow, the next day is to aggressively have your department get back on its feet. So, yeah.
So I guess we're not going to do this. Is that right?
I'll table it. If that's
May I make a remark?
Sure.
I was gonna circle back to A and ask what the positions look like under the managers, because I don't know what's going on. I don't know if there's a department that's strong outside of a director leaving,
or if a director's leaving and then more people are leaving from like a certain team. And so like, I can't, we can't do anything if we don't get that information. And so,
Yeah, well, I guess I'm just trying to put myself in the position, I'd say pick something. If that's the top priority, to have the org chart and have that, that's one thing. Giving someone 5 actions, 6 actions is a lot, this is a homework.
and if I panicked because a certain section, maybe I learned, because I have no idea, but a certain section had a lot of vacancies, but then G was answered, which is any job interviews by positions currently scheduled, then okay, they're flowing and something's happening. But if it's just dead over somewhere and then everyone's leaving, I would like to see, I'm in support of understanding the bigger picture, outside of what Eli.
Yeah. I do hear you, and I do appreciate where your comments are coming from. What I'm not certain about, so I know that Nicole mentioned the org chart. I'm not sure, because I too had seen some of the limited org charts that show the fire department or the planning department, but not every non-union position listed below planning. So we recognize there have been some vacancies, but those vacancies are occurring in real time as well. So sometimes it's been on Tuesday, you find this out, and then on Thursday, you find this out. And so we are reacting to those. There is a plan or a strategy to the extent that, for example, getting someone in planning that could hit the ground running, that understood planning, that understood all of the vacancies that exist and the roles within planning, so that they could begin to assist in filling some of those positions that we think are very critical and very important. So there's those kind of conversations about how we're going to map out a strategy going forward. We had a conversation today about, do we need to use LinkedIn more? What is the cost? Can we do some research on that for a certain level of positions? But there were no notes taken, there was no minutes or emails, and so that's where I'm going, do we have to create notes or minutes, or just share with you the strategies that we're using to try to fill the vacancies? We'd be glad to do that at any point in time. Some of these things we're reacting to in real time. If there is an org chart that shows all of the non-union positions and vacancies, I'd be glad to share that with you. And I'm not sure if what Nicole referred to does exactly that, shows all of those, because when I read that as all non-union, I don't know what all the non-union positions are within the city. I've also seen city websites where they have job descriptions listed. You can point to them at any point, whether they're vacant or not vacant. We'd love to get to that point. It's just that right now it's going to be difficult, though. So I do hear you, and I am not trying to be difficult. I don't know if that exists, if we are able to provide that, or some of the things that are requested here, and that's where I'm coming from on some of those.
What I'm hearing you saying is the timeline is too tight?
Very tight.
Yeah, this is the 18th as in Friday, or is that my 17th, March 18th Sunday? Yeah, I mean.
And I also, I do not want to give breath or life to the rumor that there's something unethical occurring. That is not happening. Nothing has changed. So if it wasn't done this way for the last 11 years, nothing has changed. We are not doing any new or different hiring practices or models or anything like that. As vacancies become available, we're posting the jobs and trying to fill those positions. I'm sorry if there is and I've tried to deal with that internally, but if there is that perception, I'm open to looking for solutions to that. Maybe more transparency in some other way would be beneficial, but I also want to reiterate and reinforce the message that there has been no change in practice or policy or procedure for filling vacancies, and there's not a team out recruiting or trying to solicit or find. I don't want to give that energy, honestly.
Yeah. Well, kind of end this, I think most people understand that, and they understand for purposes of how things leak out or whatever happened, that's a really boring story to tell, so no one really wants to tell that. But I will say this is a good long-term project, obviously, to unpack this, and this is part of organization of what we should do, and this is very transparent and very good. I just think the timeline's tight for while you're doing multiple interviews and doing the stuff that you're doing in this. I know it's in this time frame, so I'd say, can we keep this conversation alive around what a practical timeline is around this? Is that kind of agreeable?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's just, yeah, I agree with all the points inside of this. I just think you need more time.
I have something I want to say too. If we're not going to take any of this into consideration, I would like to know how I can understand, as a city council person, what is going on. Because you mentioned long term, but short term, every day, we're reading about someone that's leaving, and so I want to get my head wrapped around it. People are looking at us. People are saying this or that, maybe about working for the city of East Lansing, and so if we're scrapping this, how can I understand more clearly what's going on and where we do need to focus on, because we really have serious shortages, or a person has left and therefore other people are like, me too.
Hi, Marie Wicks, interim city clerk. I just thought maybe I could propose something that I would be willing to do, because my office has pledged support to our standing remaining HR person, that maybe would just be a boiled down version of, and maybe it would address some of what Councilmember Brookover and Councilmember Watson are looking for. What I would propose would be just, and city manager, if I may, just a simple spreadsheet. I think I could probably do a quick survey amongst my colleagues and just find out, what positions are missing, and then I could also probably do a quick search for what has been posted, what job descriptions are available, and I could just do a check mark. I think I could probably accomplish that pretty easily. I don't necessarily need to speak to some of the other stuff, but if I really am willing to do those things and just create a simple document so that you know where we are. It's not a value-laden document, and my as I propose it, it just for informational purposes, if that would help address some of the concerns and just have a simplified way of approaching this, I'm more than willing to do that. So I'll just leave you with that.
Does that sound okay?
I'm okay with all of it. I just thought the 18th is tight. I'm not against it, opposed to anything on this list.
I think to your specific question about what we're doing when people leave, I am certainly meeting with and talking with individuals to see what were their motivations, what were their reasons, to try to collect that information and develop strategies to deal with that. Candidly, we had talked about doing perhaps using a wage study, using ARPA funds to look at a wage study and a position study. We had actually had that conversation about the need to do that, specifically that, and that was something that would have been moving forward. Talked about having essentially meet and greet with individual council people with the steering committee. I broached that subject with the steering committee earlier this week, and to talk about a way so that they could communicate to you directly and have that opportunity in a way to talk about their concerns, that could be their staffing shortages or any other ways that council could be supportive of them and they could be supportive of the desires of council. So I was trying to arrange for some of those things so that you could have better communications in that regard. So again, I think we understand the concern. I think it's going to be very likely that we'll have to have a conversation about retention bonuses or something else to maintain. We are definitely looking at, are wages comparable? Are they fair? Is there a need for retention bonuses? There's a lot of strategies around this, and I could perhaps put a memo together about those things as well to assist, but I just wanted to understand what it is we're really trying to get to and report out on.
Yeah, I didn't need much. Was that, Councilperson Brooke, or was that agreeable to get the initial document from the clerk and then move forward to expand on this?
Whatever you guys want. It's a start.
It's a start. It's a start.
There we go.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, moving forward in that, Madam Clerk. And I think I'll kind of build on, I think everything's able to be kind of looked at this point. I think it's a good time to look at all the systems. Systems are the challenge. That prevents us from having to, and Councilperson Brookover is nailing this, that the systems are effective, so you don't even need, there is no conflict when something occurs, you go to the system versus it being individual, upon individual or putting people in, what does the playbook say? And I think there's a lot to that. That's why I feel really guilty handing you an entire, saying build a playbook in the middle of while you're trying to build a department and that as well. This is something, this is all important stuff, but yeah, there's 8 hours in the day. So I know you guys are interviewing and doing everything in your power from that perspective. So yeah, right. Got to sleep somewhere. Yeah. So. Okay, so thank you for the commitment from the clerk to get us an initial document. And then long term, not super long term. Let's build out on this question right here, as we can get these documents. And if we find that we don't have them, that's just something to put I think as well to put a pen in, that we have good, real job descriptions and real these types of things. Because even that begs the question: how do we fairly evaluate if we don't have great job descriptions? And now you're coming from a baseline that doesn't exist, and then that's conflict. All this, yeah, we know where this all goes. So, yes is the answer long term to this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, item 5.3. Discussion of East Lansing Downtown Management Board's accomplishments and recommendations for renewal of their principal shopping district special assessment with increased rates and caps.
Hi, Council. Good to see you. So yeah, Matt Apostle, Community and Economic Development Specialist here with the city. Today I'm going to be talking extremely briefly, because it's past my bedtime, about the Downtown Management Board, aka the DMB, particularly the accomplishments in very brief order, and then the proposal for the special assessment increase. So yeah, what is the DMB? The DMB is East Lansing's principal shopping district. The DMB helps promote downtown as a desirable place to live, work, and play through a variety of marketing campaigns and events. The DMB is funded through a special assessment levied upon the commercial properties within the PSD, which the map is right here as well as in your agenda packet. Think from like around Crunchies or that Big B all the way down to Collingwood, sort of that Albert Avenue corridor. So yeah, if you think of the DDA as like infrastructure and like the developer, DMB is sort of that marketing arm. So the DMB's current budget funds a portion of the time of one staff member plus an intern, but the three main things that they work on, I would say, are placemaking and events, downtown social media and branding, as well as business support and collaborations. For our placemaking events, I included a lot of fun pictures. This could include a variety of things. Think weekly game nights at Albert Alfresco, live music, MSU drawing marathon, moonlight extravaganza, great pumpkin walk. I could go on and on, but kind of brief on time. So generally speaking, we're going to do these events bring a sense of place to our downtown and encourage economic growth through getting more foot traffic. Downtown social media and branding campaign. The DMB runs the downtown EL social medias, as well as has the daytime, nighttime, anytime branding campaign, or DNA. That includes things like our clock tower banner program that highlights events that are going on, street giveaways such as the t-shirt that you see the guy wearing right there, our DNA card, which is our downtown e-gift card where businesses can sign up, and then the gift cards that are given out at events, as well as during our holiday BOGO for buy one, get one free on the DNA cards. It encourages local spending. Also, social media videos. Everyone remembers Trivia on the Street. I won't show it to you tonight, but that, as well as our Gary Caldwell Productions videos, which are intended to promote the DNA campaign, recap or promote special events, as well as do things like our Day in the Life campaign that we're doing right now that promotes what it's like to live or work in downtown East Lansing. Finally, business support and collaborations. This is like our grand openings, falls under the DMB, as well as business collaborations that happen in Albert Al Fresco or other public spaces, Yoga on Albert, Takeout Tuesday, etc. Also included in honor of March Madness this week, Go Green. Am I going to get a one go white? Thank you so much. We had a battle of the businesses in 2022. I think it was pretty successful. We'll try to do it again next year. DMB's funding sources, as you can see, we yield approximately in the range of $45,000 a year on our special assessment at the rates listed there. Additional funding sources for fiscal year 23 were $5,000 in the parking marketing allocation and $44,750, basically doubling the special assessment from the DDA going to the DMB. The current special assessment for the DMB is set to expire at the end of this fiscal year, and these rates have remained unchanged since the DMB was created in 1997. So we can think about a bit of inflation and how that might have affected the utility of that $44,000. So after months of consideration, the DMB approved a recommendation to renew the special assessment at the rates and caps to the left. Working with the assessing office, we believe this would yield in the range of $109,000. I think I said that right. The current rates would be 7 cents per square foot for the basement, 18 cents per square foot for the first floor, 10 cents per square foot for the second floor, and then 5 cents per square foot for all other floors. This is, generally speaking, nearly doubling. For the first floor, it's more than doubling. For the basement and above the second floor, it's less than doubling. That's because the DMB believed that there would be a perceived greater benefit of the services from the DMB for those first floor businesses. We're also doubling the caps up to $5,000 and $8,000. This increase would allow the DMB to catch up to the funding levels of similar Michigan principal shopping districts and expand its efforts, even without the financial support of the DDA. To touch on a couple of those, I included in the agenda packet a few different communities we were able to find that are like medium-sized, small to medium-sized Michigan communities that have a DMB structure where they do a DDA and then a DMB, or they don't have any DDA and they just have a DMB that is a principal shopping district and assesses using per square foot rather than mills. So that's why there's not a lot of data, but it was what we could find, basically showing that this increase would sort of catch us up to these other communities. And then I touch on the DDA because, as a lot of you guys know, the DDA has its own financial situations that it is going through and exercising through, making it uncertain whether the DDA would be able to supplement the DMB's budget like this in fiscal year 24 and beyond. All right, so what comes next? At April 18th's meeting, I would work with the assessing office to have City Council have for consideration a resolution to receive and file the special assessment. We would send out public notices. We would have a full outreach plan for the affected commercial property owners. There'd be 2 public hearings, and likely in the month of May. And then on July 1, if we got the special assessment increase or whatever you guys wanted to do, because it's your decision to approve, we'll have that budget. thanks, and let me know if you have any questions.
I don't have any questions, but I did want to add one point of context for the other council members. A similar increase had been approved and actually voted through council to be assessed in 2019 and then in 2020 when we were hit with a pandemic which affected our downtown businesses. We decided not to implement that increase. And so this is not on top of that previous increase. This would be instead of that increase. So we kind of went back to square one with the pandemic.
So the increase was authorized, never took.
Yeah, it was voted through council and authorized and never took effect.
Got it. Any questions?
Can you walk me through or tell me about the chart with the green on it?
The chart with the green on it.
With all the City of East Lansing Special Assessment Rule 77. Can you just tell me what it is out loud so I can make sure?
Yes, so that's sort of the very estimate. It's not final. It's what David Lee down in assessing was able to provide us. That would basically show you the square footage of each of these parcels in the downtown in the DMB district, and approximately how much would be captured by the special assessment at the rates proposed by the DMB.
Why is it green or white?
So the green the green rows are exempt because they're residential in most cases, but green means exempt.
So pay attention to the white.
Yes, pay attention to the white, and I am not sure, but at least on some of these that I've been working on, the ones that are highlighted or capped, there's 4 parcels in our downtown that are capped under both systems.
And this doesn't show the difference, though, of, 1997 to the 2023 proposal.
That is just the proposal from the DMB. I'm happy to provide what it is currently, and then sort of you guys can make that comparison from there.
Yeah, thank you.
That'd be awesome. I can get you that tomorrow.
It doesn't have to be tomorrow.
I'll work on it.
In 1 hour and 15 minutes, it's going to be tomorrow.
I'll be typing up a storm.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Good night.
Thank you all for coming out. Meeting adjourned.